Okay. Hello, hello everyone, and welcome back to Hoppean BookClub. This is Colton. Emo, this is Joel.
Yenzerat.
I'm emo.
Okay.
Wait, did we all get that out?
I think
Yep.
we're good.
Yep.
Okay.
So, this podcast is to go over Austrian economics books and Austro-libertarianism. It's for people to read and follow along. We want a discussion with the chat, so post questions. I'll be looking at the chat. I think all of us will be looking at the chat. We also want suggestions of books, with the theme being Austrian economics and libertarianism. We actually got a suggestion for a book. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's the book we're going to be going to next, after we finish this book next week. So, yeah, that's basically how suggestions work. If it's a really good suggestion, we're going to do it. Actually, our friend Matt Ray gave us this suggestion because we were doing a entire year based surrounding Mises, essentially. So this week we are finishing up chapter 2. We're gonna start and finish chapter 3, and we're gonna start chapter 4. Basically, we're gonna end on page 80, which is good because every week we're supposed to be doing 40 pages of a book. Yep. There's also, so as we wait for people to come on in, do you have anything you guys want to discuss? You're one of us, so yeah. Yeah, I don't expect anything fruitful to come out of that. Just yep. Yep. So, yeah. Okay. So, yeah. I'm also trying to get the streams going again. I have been planning at least 2 streams, 2 ongoing streams. One on Esso's videos attacking Hoppianism. He basically doesn't understand anything he reads. I don't think he's functionally literate. And then there's the one with Taylor and Thama that we need to do. The problem is that Thama's in the Czech Republic, and so it's just difficult to figure out a time that works for everyone.
We'll get it done.
Yep. I actually think I have a solution to that, but let's The crazy thing is that in my mind, Czechoslovakia is a thing, but yeah. So whenever I hear Czech, I also think of Slovakia like being in there as well, and it's just like I have to remind myself that no, those are 2 separate countries because of the Balkanization. Actually, speaking of Balkanization, it's not the worst thing in the world. Um, yeah, I was talking to someone last night or 2 nights ago, and he was worried about the U.S. balkanization and saying to get out now, and I'm just like, balkanization is probably the best possible outcome of all of this. Oh yeah. It was actually better before when the the emperor was still elected by the princes. Yep. Because back then you had all these small, essentially counties that were their own nation states, and you could freely travel between all of these different jurisdictions, and also it was much easier to. There was actual decentralization, which is what the founding fathers wanted, but they made the mistake of democratizing the state instead of just having small principalities. Man's social philosophy, and section 2 is the anti-capitalistic front. From the beginning, socialism and interventionism was rejected by those who understood economics, but they found approval by the ignorant masses who were driven by the passions of envy and hatred. It's actually interesting to me that he actually says the passions of envy and hatred, because that is that type of language I've only found in more theological works.
And Mises is a pretty hardcore atheist, isn't he?
I wouldn't say he's a hardcore atheist, but he is an atheist. Like,
I would say he's more of a skeptical type than like the cringe Dawkins type.
Yeah, I don't think he ever really talked about religion. That he was just kind of like, he wasn't so much an atheist as he was irreligious.
Guess that makes more sense.
But yeah, I just thought that language there, it just kind of struck out to me, and I was like, wait a minute, I've only seen religious people talk about the passions. So anyways, the social philosophy of the Enlightenment that paved the way for the liberal program of economic freedom and representative government did not suggest the annihilation of the three old powers: the monarchy, the aristocracy, and the churches. I found this kind of interesting to say, because while it is true the very, very beginning of the Enlightenment didn't want to destroy these old powers, as the Enlightenment progressed, they did turn against all of these old powers. So the European liberals did not want to institute republics, but to get rid of the privileges of the aristocrats, not their titles,
estrogen.
Estrogen and estates. So basically, what he's saying is they wanted equality before the law. What is really interesting to me is that Hoppe also goes into this in from aristocracy to monarchy
to democracy.
I was trying to remember exactly how it went, and what he called each one. So anyways, he basically talks about how the monarchs, in order to create monarchies, which are super feudalism, how they used egalitarianism in order to argue for that, and then the liberals came right back and used egalitarianism to get rid of their titles. So that was interesting, how egalitarianism basically is what led us in the direction that we've had. It's not just like the last 200 years the egalitarians all of a sudden became a thing. At least according to Hoppe.
Yeah, which has roots. It has roots in egalitarian ethics, but obviously, it's not wanting to be equal anymore. Like you said, it's like populist in a way, where they say like these people are not your equals; they're the bad guys. You know what I mean? Like they take everything from you, and that's
Right.
essentially this. This whole book is about that sort of mentality, obviously with the title, but still, like it's an egalitarian ethic with an anger streak towards those that they view as their betters, even if they don't say it outright.
Well, I wouldn't say they view them as their betters. They view them as having better things because of some having done bad things. And so I do think egalitarianism is the correct term to apply to them. It's just interesting that Hoppe would apply this to the monarchists.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I believe that has its roots in Gramsci, wherever he began to understand that it wasn't about economics anymore, that it would have to be about culture. And that's really where they started to, other than, the Russian Revolution and everything like that, and the Bolsheviks and everything and then the, USSR. They knew that the only way that they could really win somewhere is culturally, and economics is almost like barely a thought compared to how you can take over an entire society once you break down its structures.
Yep. And people think this is a crazy conspiracy theory.
Just read a Gramsci paper. You know what I mean? And that CJ Angle is actually the one who turned me on to Gramsci whenever he was writing for Bastion. I don't know what's going on with that, by the way. I hope he's all right. But whenever he wrote one of his essays about Gramsci and the Culture Conf, I believe is the title. And that really, really, when you look into it, it really did go from Marxian, scientific, materialism, all that, and just thrown it out the window for a social philosophy that still has those same roots. You just call it cultural Marxism, but it really has the us versus them, mentality, but it really did switch from, like, in today's age, from economics to culture, and destroying what makes Western society, capitalist society, great, by dismantling what, culturally makes them great.
Yep. Yeah, we talked about violin.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up again.
Yeah. So we actually do get to talk about the Tsar here shortly. So let me just get to that point. It might have been expected for the princes, aristocrats, and clergy, who all professed their conservatism, to defend the essentials of Western civilization from socialist attacks. After all, the socialists did not shrink from saying that under socialist totalitarianism, there would be no room for what they called the remnant of tyranny, oppression, and superstition. These privileged groups were motivated by envy and hatred, then by cool reasoning. The Hohenzollern instituted a policy of American observers called monarchical socialism. The Romanovs toyed with labor unionism as a weapon against those supporting representative government in the capitalist class. In every European nation, the aristocrats were cooperating with the enemies of capitalism. It is very interesting to me to read about the Romanovs like that, because essentially they got killed in the Bolshevik Revolution basically because they created it. It's almost like what we have today with blowback from American foreign policy. And it's also, go ahead.
It's also like all these corporations saying like Black Lives Matter and stuff, or like the Cato Institute still getting a brick thrown in its window. It's never good enough.
Yeah,
Right.
they think that if they signal enough, and that like, no, we're on your side, they think that they'll A, keep their positions of power, and B, won't get put up against a wall. And if they have any sense of history, especially with this example, they'll learn that they're the same as the rest of us whenever it comes to the enemies of the people.
Yep.
In their
once
terms.
Once you've served your purpose, you're not needed anymore.
Oh yeah, Cole, am I allowed to cuss on this? I was trying not to, but I just did.
Keep it light.
Okay, yeah.
It happens, but just like don't try to keep it light. Don't cuss out for like 5 minutes straight.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm tasteful, Midwest / East Coast cultures. We try and keep it, we're trying to keep it polite.
Yep. So, yeah, no, it's very interesting to me that it kind of explains why Europe went so to shit in the early 20th century, because all of a sudden Hungary, Romania, Russia, Germany, almost every single country went to some type of fascism or communism. Right, but but the issue with saying this is just a byproduct of democracy is that these were the countries that embraced democracy the last. France and Britain had democracies far before Hungary or Romania did, and even far before Germany did.
And I was just thinking, because Mises was obviously like he was an advocate of democracy. He thought that it was, much better than monarchies and everything. And this reads almost like a defense of real democracy, although like he's saying that like they were trying to maintain their status while trying to toe the line with the democratic masses. And I'm not sure if I'm just reading that in like a Hoppean what's it called, like a Hoppean biased way, but that's how it came across to me. Like it was like he was trying to defend democracy while saying that these people got killed because they tried to like keep democracy under control. You know what I mean? Like in their own terms.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand what you're saying there, but he's actually talking about the aristocrats that were basically the non-democratic function of government.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was saying. Like when they felt that there was going to be some pressure, they tried to allow a little bit of democracy, but allowed just enough to where it wasn't going to be that bad for them, but it still ended up being bad for them. You know what I mean?
I don't really
They tried to rein
understand
it in.
if Mises is so like adamant about private property, then what is the function of democracy and the system that he wants? Like, what are we voting to do if democracy is in effect an expropriation of property from a minority?
Well, you see, he doesn't
I
view
don't.
democracy as as a Rothbardian does. He views democracy as voting, like actual voting, instead of voting with your wallet. And so this is why I really dislike the sovereign consumer analogy that he uses at the beginning of this book, because it kind of creates this concept that can be applied to democracy. However, it doesn't, like, if you read how the concept is laid out, it doesn't actually support democracy. But because of the language that you use with the sovereign consumer, you can then make this analogy to democracy. But it's just like, well, if you look at the concept of the sovereign consumer, what it's based on is markets. And a democracy is not based on markets. It's
the robbing of markets.
yeah. So it's really, that's why I don't like that terminology, even though it does help people understand how the market works. It basically clouds judgment, even though it is technically useful as a pedagogical tool for someone who's like never really studied economics. Right, but Mises really believed in the democracy thing. Like, this was not something that he was just doing to appear sane. Okay.
I would agree with that.
So is there something wrong with my audio?
You're cool.
I hear you fine.
Oh, School Lockheed can't hear anything from me.
What?
School Lockheed, which is a guy in chat, says he can't hear me.
Really?
My machine broke.
Since I'm in my car and on my phone, I can't like look at the thing, but can the chat hear me?
Sometimes. Okay. I'll keep yeah, I'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, that's weird as hell. Yeah,
Okay.
that's strange.
All right. So everywhere eminent theologians will try to discredit the free enterprise system, and thus by implication support either socialism or radical interventionism. Militant anti-theists and Christian theologians are almost unanimous in passionately rejecting the market economy and praising the benefits of omnipotent government.
Wow, mirroring the modern day. Literally mirroring.
Yep. Yeah, this is very interesting because you see I'm part of religious children, and you see priests saying like, "Oh, I have to be part of the left and right because like I have policy decisions that are classically left or classically right," and I'm just like, "You probably don't understand economics then."
Yeah, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Actually, we're going to be getting to that soon. What Mises thinks of people who speak about economics but don't know anything about economics.
I remember that passage really well because like well one of the what you just read was one of the sections that I really really resonated with me as soon as I read it because I was just like it's nuts because it's like you have the atheist crowd or like the anti-theist crowd
That
who
basically make government their god.
make government their god, and I was one of those people. I mean, I'm still not a religious person by any means, but I'm definitely more friendly to Christianity than I ever was in my adult life. I would say when I was a kid, obviously went to church and everything like that, but and then and then you look at and I was a leftist because you think that oh, those right-wing religious nuts, you know what I mean, like they're all crazy, they're all crazy about Jesus, but they don't want to give none of their money to anybody, and you buy into it, and then you read one good economics book, even not Keynesian shit where you can justify everything just by government fiat, actually you hear about for me it was Ron Paul, and I mean I was just like, dude, this guy, he's a Christian guy. I'm not. But, everything he
I don't know if we're still like, if it's just
Okay.
are we still connected to the video and everything? Like, is YouTube still up and running?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
No,
Taylor was
yeah, we
giving us
figured that
his
out.
yeah, Taylor was just giving us his religious life.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whenever I went to like a Christian school whenever I was younger, and it was like an evangelical school, and like I like when I got out, I was in like my rebellious phase. Like I was like, oh that shit's stupid, you know what I mean? And then like all of a sudden like, and I was a lefty and everything like that, and then I like got back into Ron Paul because whenever I was like 15 and 16, I was like, yeah, this guy, he's awesome. He's like the good guy. And then I kind of got into like Chomsky and everything like that. And then, you know, I was still in my like cringe atheist phase. And then I found Ron Paul, and I was like, this guy's like a Christian guy. Like, there's no way that he could be like one of these crazies. And then I got into like I read the Revolution, and then it was over. It was game over. And like, but yeah, I mean, it's just like it's funny how you know in this passage, it's like the anti-theists and some theologians, but especially the anti-theists in from my experience are like crazy hard left because they make the state their god, and they pray to it, and they want that's why like every time like a Republican wins, they cry like there's brimstone coming from the sky, and it's really unhealthy, and B, kind of funny.
Yeah,
Yep.
I had a really similar I had a really similar experience coming up and changing my opinions too. I knew Ron Paul like way back in the day, but like I ended up still becoming a lefty because I didn't. Nobody showed me any Rothbard or Mises or anything back in the day, so it was just like, government bad. Um, and then I
Yeah.
ended up, and then Bernie ran, and I was like, war is a big thing for me, and I was just like, well, fuck, all these things he's saying make sense to me. But like as time went on, and I saw like the left getting even more and more rabid, and like just any any horrible thing that was just a huge infringement on anybody's rights was just being praised by everybody around me, and if I spoke out against it even a little bit, I was just like, you need to go back in your corner and know your place. And I was like, or we'll fuck you up like somehow. And I
Yeah,
was like, oh shit.
it's so yep.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
gotta
Yes.
think about the children.
Yep. We need to spend more money. We need to spend more money on a institution that keeps on getting worse and worse results. And if they keep on getting worse results, that just proves that they need more money.
Colton, it's bad because they don't have enough money. Give them more money and make everything better, right? They apply the same standard to Amazon and everything else, right?
Yep.
God bless them. New York City did the same thing.
Into political origins, what actually made me interested in politics. So I was raised up in a Catholic household when I was young. My mom got full custody and basically took me away from the church. So I stopped being a conservative, just as like an 8-year-old, like just liking conservative politicians, to basically being raised in a left liberal household, going to public school and all that. And so when I was a teenager, I just believed, oh, you can just have a supercomputer somewhere and run economic calculations on the economy and just plan everything from that. Yeah, but that's what I believed. I was explaining this. It's like, okay, we have all these economic equations and all this supply and demand and, all this crap. And so you can just punch it all into a giant, have the technology now to actually do this. So that's what got me really interested in politics, is because, what is the best way to run the economy is what I thought politics was all about. Essentially, what's the best way to run the country? Essentially,
Monetarist, Colton.
Well, no, it wasn't even monetarist. I was a straight up Marxist back then.
No, I was just laughing just because it's all about efficient government when it comes to the monetarist. So I was just being a dick. But
right,
yeah,
but it's the same thing with the Marxists. They believe that the labor theory of value just all of a sudden gives you efficiency.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, I'm in a group chat with literal all tankies. And well, one ANCOM, and I'm like the heel. It's great. Oh my god, I get so much exercise doing that. I can't even tell you. It's fantastic. But I mean, they're my boys, but it's still like we fight all the time, and it's just like do you like? Hold on. Did anybody see that? Did anybody see that quote from that Existential Comics yesterday? That was so dumb. Okay, so work that is necessary for society to function. Dash. Doing housework, raising children, studying at school, organizing social events. If you are doing this work and not getting paid, someone else is taking your money. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, these people actually think that doing housework should produce income in your own house.
I've seen that stuff before. I've seen articles back in the day when like the SJW stuff was starting up. That there were articles being like, mothers doing housework should be getting paid for it and stuff like that. And I was just like, or what are you, devoid of love?
No. But so when I was in MOA, they actually had a response to this, and it's like, okay, you get paid for that, but then you also have to pay half of the mortgage and the food bills and all the utilities and crap. Like, do you think that this is going to actually benefit women if we start doing this?
Who's gonna pay them, for one?
Well, it would be the husband.
Is it supposed to be the husband?
Yeah, it's supposed to be the husband. However, if we're going to do that, where the husband has to pay his wife to do everything around the house, the wife should also have to pay him for the mortgage and the food and all of that.
Please God, I know some of these, like, these people don't know anything about the subjective theory of value. Although the C4SS guys, they'll be like, I have a subjective labor theory of value. Fuck you, Kevin Carson. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Hi, Nocti.
But
Nocti just came in, and then all of a sudden you're just like, "Fuck you, Kevin Carson."
What is the
I'm glad that's his introduction to me, to be honest.
What is the subjective labor theory of value?
You can find out, because I'm not reading it. Because
actually, Jens Cap, we are going to be talking about that with Thama the next stream, so we can talk about it then, and Emo can just watch the stream.
About the subjective labor theory of value, or just the labor theory of value?
Both.
Oh God. Oh. Yeah.
Well, it's also very interesting.
Yeah, Kyle, that would be a reasonable take on the actual economic fucking rules of the wife in the household. No, we just want to get paid, even though there's no capital being put up front. Remember that.
Who came up with the term? Was it Rothbard that came up with psychic capital?
Oh, I have no idea.
I have no idea.
I can't remember, but these things aren't material necessarily, but your friendships, love, things like this, the connections with other people you have, they accumulate. These things, in a sense, are capital, and these things are subjectively valued and important in different ways to different people.
Emo, the chat did not hear anything you just said.
Well, fuck.
Okay, because they were just chatting that they can't hear anything. So
what is happening?
I have no idea. I think it actually might be on Kyle's end because it seems to be on everyone. Yeah, Mario says it's still cutting out, so no idea.
Yeah, same.
And on the bottom of OBS, bottom right-hand corner, when I speak, does the audio go up and like change?
YouTube.
Yeah, no idea what's going on then.
We're good. If it cuts out every once in a while, we'll just get through it.
Yeah, so it cuts out from time to time and we just hear some background noises, which is odd.
Yeah.
What's the chat saying right now? Are we good right now?
I think we should be. So let me actually read this next passage, because we have barely gotten anywhere in this book.
This is all my fault.
So, post-socialist ideology is ever present in domestic policy. One assumes that those who are not rich favor planning, socialism, and communism. This takes for granted that economic interests of the masses are hurt by capitalism. People do not ask for socialism because they know it will improve their conditions. They do this because they believe it will. They pretend to only trust in experience, but refuse to acknowledge that man's standard of living is incomparably higher in capitalist America than in the socialist paradise of the Soviets. In dealing with economically backward countries, people maintain the same disposition. At aiming at an improvement of their economic conditions, they should adopt capitalism. And there he's talking about the third world countries that, in the Orient. So this would be like Vietnam, Laos, Burma, that type of place. Yin's Cap, we can't hear you.
I'm not talking.
Okay, your green thing was going on and off, so like you were talking.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I wasn't talking. I was just listening for once.
Sometimes like if somebody's not talking, the icon will still go green.
I'm gonna start muting myself when I'm not talking, just so it doesn't do that. Just so there's no confusion too, because I have the mute button right in front of me too on the mic. So.
Okay, so it is ironic that the Orientals cast longing glances at Western prosperity and are enraptured by Russian communism. It is more paradoxical that Americans, having experienced the products of big business, exalt the Soviet system. So I'll leave it to discussion for this section.
Guys.
Discuss.
I have wait, I'm sorry. I have some good news and some bad news.
Okay.
I think it's not like a problem with the stream or anything, like the connection. That's the good news. So I think that everything that you guys said was properly recorded. The bad news is that I think that everything that I said, none of it actually went to the stream. And that's why it was just background noise.
Literally
how?
the entire time?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay,
I'm
so
not sure how,
that
but I think
that makes sense.
yeah. I'm
So
pretty sure
I
that's
think
what
the
happened.
chat I think the chat may have been mistaking my voice for Kyle's.
Yeah,
I don't know if we
yeah.
sound the same.
I thought that they thought that you guys were talking and like you just weren't able to hear it when it was just like me talking. And
You had so many valuable things to say, and they'll never know.
yeah, it's just I'm sorry. I think because my audio input is like separate from you guys's, because obviously I don't hear my own voice, so it's not desktop audio, it's my microphone input. And for some reason it's just disconfigured from the last session, so it just wasn't going in, and I had to like manually input the mic into OBS. So they should be able to hear me now, but they didn't hear anything that I said so far.
That's
Okay.
all right.
Okay, so
I'm sorry.
sorry,
That's like
my
on me.
my mic goes green when I'm not talking, so it seems like chat was mistaken Kyle talking and not the audio not going through for my mic cutting out.
Yeah.
Just in case the stream still can't hear Kyle, I'm going to repeat that because it doesn't help the chat understand what's going on for the person who they can't hear to explain what's going on.
Yeah, no, I'm fairly sure they can hear me now. I'm almost certain, but yeah. I'm sorry about that. That was entirely my fault. I just didn't realize that OBS had disconfigured for some reason.
All good,
Wow,
yo.
that's a hour. That's an hour of multiple minutes of just silence.
Yep.
No, I mean, and the good thing, I guess, is I didn't talk that much about the book. Most of what I said so far was about our tangents, but it still kind of sucks. I guess we can finish the episode normally now. I'm really sorry about that.
Don't worry about it, brother.
Mario says we didn't need to hear it to know it was something based.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking
That's
about.
the spirit.
That's the support we need.
My reputation precedes me.
Okay, so one thing that Kyle said that was important is he will be going on the Fakertarians podcast at some point in late August to early September, and I'm sure he will be painted as some sort of villain. So make sure you show him some support.
I am the villain.
Well, yeah, so am I. I know, but let us play with it a little bit. Come on, be a good heel, Kyle.
All right.
Cut me a fucking break.
So, it's actually kind of interesting when you're talking about villains, because the most controversial thing I've apparently spoken about is religion.
Yeah, I know. Like you say some stuff when it comes to politics where it's like I'm like, all right, well, okay, let's go. Like he's turning heel for a sec, but then as soon as like you take like an orthodox critique of like Roman Catholicism, that's when your shit blows up. Like that's whatever. Like, and I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, thing they're talking about. And I just see you guys fighting.
I've had whole 2-hour I'm not even religious, and I've had 2-hour conversations with Colton about the Orthodox Church, and I'm just like, wow, I'm learning way more than I ever did going to Baptist church.
The first time me and Colton ever talked was on Discord because we were checking all my stuff that I just bought for these type of streams, and then we just got into an hour and a half conversation about liturgy. And I was like, I don't even know what liturgy is, but this is great. I'm just sitting there.
So for everyone, liturgy is the Sunday service where you take communion. So it's basically Mass if you're Catholic, and it's the Sunday service if you're Protestant. It's what is analogous to that, essentially.
Let me correct you on the Baptist or Protestant one. It's every now and then if you're a Protestant, and specifically if you're a Baptist. I don't know why it just is.
It's like once a month.
It's not even once a month. It's like Christmas and Easter.
When I was Methodist, so I think we did like once a month.
Yeah. So, in Orthodox, in more Orthodox countries where they have way more people going to churches, it's every day.
Wow.
So after you get off work, you go for an hour to the Orthodox church.
That'll really
Based
cut into
in
my fishing
practical.
schedule.
Yep. And then every morning, like at 7, you'd go as well.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, that's cool though. I'm down.
Yep,
And
so-
it's aesthetic as fuck.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Like-
don't know if you guys have ever watched the service, because everything is being live streamed now, so people that don't actually go can just like go to YouTube, type in liturgy Sunday morning, and just watch a live stream. So.
Technology.
Well, it's also interesting because most parishes would never live stream, because they want people there in person. Because that's the entire thing. But anyways, it's just very, very different. And when you actually go, the incense turns everything. It just gets way more intense because the Orthodox try to use all of your senses in the worship, and so you just get really overwhelmed. Whereas normally, you're not really smelling too much. You don't have a whole bunch of lights and flames in front of you, and so it's just it's a very different experience if you never went to an Orthodox service before and not really prepared.
We should move on with the book now, though.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me get to that quote then. So, people may disagree on the question of whether everybody ought to study economics seriously, but one thing is certain. A man who publicly talks or writes about the opposition between capitalism and socialism without having fully familiarized himself with all that economics has to say about these issues is an irresponsible blabber. Babylon. So.
Yeah, he's just saying that if you're gonna criticize capitalism, you should at least understand it. And it's a pretty basic point, I think. But it's still very, very relevant.
Yeah,
Because we'll see socialists and everybody call every manner of thing that is distinctly not capitalist, not a voluntary transaction or anything, and they'll be like, "No, it's capitalism." It's just like, dude, what are you describing as capitalism?
It's just like all my it's like my commie friends that just like, they're just like, oh, well, war is capitalist. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, they're just like, imperialism is the final stage of capitalism. And I'm just like, what are you talking about?
I
Where
wish it
private
were.
property and voluntary, I know, based, but but like, where does private property and voluntary exchange come into global warfare for conquering? And it's just like, I know Kyle wants it to be, but it's just like that. But again, we can have a discussion on that. Neocon Kyle has entered the chat.
Okay, now I'm leaving. I'm offended.
Global NRX.
No, it's not. It's not. You should read. You should go on my website. You should go on my blog and read my friend's article on voluntary colonialism. You would like it.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah, you should go read it.
I'm down. I'll read.
All we gotta do is
it's
slap
actually kind of-
voluntary in front of everything.
No, it's
Yeah,
actually
so-
great.
It's actually kind of funny because in South Africa and some of these South African countries, there are actually people wishing that the Europeans would come back because they've experienced what the Chinese will do with them. And so they're like, yeah, we'd rather have the white man back. because he was much nicer than the fucking Chinese.
Yeah.
Some respect on her name.
Yeah, they did that in Hong Kong last year. There were a bunch of like people with British flags and stuff. It's pretty funny.
Yep.
If you want the British back, you know the things are going well.
Anyways,
Somebody call Sargon.
Chapter 3 is literature under capitalism, and section 1 is the market for literary products. So, capitalism and status societies differ drastically. Capitalism provides for initiative, while status societies does not tolerate deviation. Profit is the signal of successful deviation from custom, and loss is the penalty of those who cling to obsolete methods. However, this freedom of the individual is limited. It depends on the appreciation of the individual's achievements by the customers. It is not good performance, but performance that is recognized as good, that is appreciated. Capitalism is a system for the mass production for the satisfaction of the needs of the masses. It has raised the living standard to a height not dreamt possible in earlier ages. An outstanding example is the broad market for literature. Many now are employed in the creation of literature. Before the industrial age, writing was a liberal art, a hobby, not a profession like blacksmithing or shoemaking. It was a noble pursuit of wealthy people. It was the hope that moving writers from needing patronage from kings that the masses would be free of the tutelage of kings and aristocrats, and the educated classes would reign supreme.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so that's the end of that section. So that little end there really reminded me of how Protestants view themselves, in my opinion. That they finally got the book, the holy book, out into the masses, and now people could really understand the Bible and really have a correct faith in of Christianity. And that's kind of how they view themselves. And I don't really want to turn this into theology hour, but I really think that they were wrong, and the fact that their traditions, even the liturgical traditions of, let's say, Reformed Baptists and Lutherans, how they keep on having to form new church associations because the old church associations have destroyed their traditions. I think that kind of proves that just getting the Bible out to everyone is not, or just literature more generally, is not really going to get people to believe in truth more readily. It's not the it's not the panacea that everyone was hoping for during the Renaissance.
Yeah, that's kind of what, when I shared Alternate History Hub's tweet last night. Luther was only successful because of the printing presses.
Paper was a mistake.
Return to monkey.
I said that like non-ironically and like semi-ironically in like some normie chat I was in, and I don't think I've ever got more pushback on anything in my life.
Yeah.
What, return to monkey?
No, paper was a mistake.
Wow.
Yeah, so I just think that the Enlightenment, at least in this aspect, was very utopian, thinking that everyone would care about truth in order to like really study all of the different thoughts that people have had throughout history, and then figure out what is actually the truth. I mean, yes, it is true that making books cheaper will allow more people that are actually interested in that to be able to do that, but it's not something that's going to just give out truth. Like, even if you're a Protestant, you have to acknowledge that there are over 33,000 different types of Protestantism, all with different interpretations of the Bible, and with contradicting views of the Bible. And so it's, even if you're a Protestant, you have to at least say that the other 33,000 different types of Protestantism are wrong.
Yeah, and that, a non-theological example of that is just like in today's public schools. I mean, you have a literal free library full of books that you could read and learn a ton while you are in school on the state's, on your parents' money or whatever that they paid the state to make you go to school. But how many kids actually sit in the library and read while they're on the government dime? You know what I mean? So it's just like the seeking of truth is not just a widespread, availability of literature. It's not a widespread availability of actual intellectual thought or intellectual teaching. It's people who want to learn this, and that's where I like the view that, if people just could read more, they would, or they would understand things more. I mean, it's just not true. I mean, we've seen that. I mean, we've had it long enough to where we see that every day, just because there's an availability of it and people that can even read it don't understand it, makes you think that, I mean, it really isn't that important.
And just having the desire to read it does not mean that they will understand it, as we can see with Esso.
Oh yeah. I mean, what did he read? One chapter of the Economics and Ethics of Private Property, and now he thinks that he can refute all of Hoppeanism?
No. He supposedly read multiple books, and and he can't even properly talk about even Hume's guillotine.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Thank God I never listened to those guys, the really popular cartoon ANCAPs back in the day. But it's just, I don't know. Thank God. I don't know. Those guys never really appealed to me. Even Dapperton, shout out Dapperton, he's an alright dude. I couldn't watch that shit. But shout out Trudel Tom. He was the only one that I could listen to.
Yeah, when I got into ANCAP stuff, and I walked into Twitter and saw all these furry ANCAP weird fucking people, I was just like, I'm gonna stay over here. Whatever y'all are doing,
saying.
I'm good.
I was like, I play baseball. What do I have in common with you people? but yeah. Then I, Mises.org. That'll get you to it. Doesn't matter.
Well, I was actually going through a minarchist phase when I met Jared, and Jared is actually the guy that brought me over to anarchism, because he was the only person that would explain to me how the open borders problem that we obviously have now would be solved in Ancapistan. I was just like, okay, we need... Because I was at the point where I believe we only really need the government for the borders, and police, and just basically national defense. And as basically, you could have border patrol be your national defense, because you could basically be Switzerland.
Yeah.
So that's basically where it was. But I was just like, you can't have open borders. That's just crazy. And actually, the no ANCAP that is for open borders has been able to riddle me this. Let's say you have a society about 400,000 ANCAPs, and it's a private law society and all that. Then the communist government decides to pay 500,000 of their military personnel to move into Ancapistan, because you have open borders, you can't stop them. And then they just buy arms through Ancapistan because there's no gun regulation. And then they just decide to overthrow Ancapistan and make it part of China. What is stopping that?
Yeah, I mean that's
Me.
a great critique of just non-Hoppian anarcho-capitalism. I mean, it's just like to think that you would just have to let these people in just because you want to trade with them is asinine if you want to preserve any part of your society that means anything.
Yep.
Yeah, I
And-
mean, it's just letting everyone in and letting everyone do, I guess, anything that doesn't directly infringe on another person or on property doesn't mean that they don't have the intention of doing that. And, you know, if you just let people come in and do as they please and then utilize the capital that your society is producing without any restrictions to, and they can just take all of that and then use it to undermine your society. And that's basically what you just described with, it could be China, but it could also be any other government, it could be any other society, it could even be another
Right.
NCAP society if they just had
I
a
just-
grudge against us for whatever reason.
I just use China because they're the obvious communists and also have the population to just be able to be like, here's $500,000. Here's 500,000 people to just wipe out this country. You know, Like-
Yep.
do you think China really cares about 500,000 people if they get to conquer new land?
Yeah,
Exactly.
And like I said, if you're gonna have restrictions in who comes in, who's able to come in, who's able to live in that community, you're gonna have to have a judicial system, even if it's a entirely private one. You're gonna have to have a system of judges and courts, I guess, and then for that to be able to function properly, you're gonna have to live in a society. You're gonna have to have a society that has an at least somewhat uniform conception of what is just and what is lawful and what should not be lawful, and that is at least in some part reliant on the I guess ethnocultural uniformity of that society. So if you just let even if you have a legal system, if you just let anyone come in regardless of their ethnocultural background in any quantities, the risk of them undermining that and like destroying those institutions is just great. And that's a big
Right,
Well,
and so that this was basically the argument is that I had against ANCAPs was basically, okay, you may have solved every issue, but you have not solved the subversion issue. Like that's the only thing that especially open borders types can't solve is how do you stop communists from just coming in?
Well,
And
one of the
also-
best essays coming into this. Oh, sorry, dude. But yeah, the essay that I always go back to is Hoppe's essay, "The Case for Free Trade and Restricted Immigration." I mean, it explains it so logically and just well that I have a hard time even coming up with a a case against it whatsoever, even if I wanted to.
Yep, and it's just but you have to remember that the ANCAPs that I understood, not being an ANCAP, was all the open borders type. So I was just like, okay, it's kind of utopian to think that you can just let whoever into your society that's built on certain foundations, especially, and those foundations would just still be there.
Oh yeah, when I was first in ANCAP, I thought that I had to be open borders, which was funny.
Yeah,
Like
same.
like when I was first in ANCAP, I was like, okay, like I don't like this idea, but I have to morally. You know what I mean? And then I read Hoppe, and I was just like, oh, I don't have to be at all. This actually makes way more sense.
Yeah.
Right, and so
Another, sorry, Colton. I want to. It's important, I think, to say this. One of the, I used to see this a lot back when I was a Lowbert. I'm not sure if they still use this argument a lot, but one of the arguments that I would hear over and over again, and back then it made sense. Now it's just dumb. Is that if we did establish an NCAP society, we would not be subverted by other governments because they would see that our society produces a lot of capital and they would want to trade with us, and thus they would not want to destroy us. And that just makes absolutely no sense if you put even like a little bit of thought into it, because if an NCAP society would actually be that much better than a society with a state, and other governments and other nations which have a state would not just allow such an example of a stateless perfect utopia just exist, so that all their citizens could just watch and realize that their government is actually not good for them. So societies that do exist under a state would have that state would have a lot of incentives to destroy a stateless society, specifically because it would function too well.
Just imagine being that historically autistic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's just like, what happens whenever there are bigger states and there are more prosperous, smaller states around them, and they are aware of it? Or, in this case, stateless orders. Do you think that they're not going to try all of their tactics to subvert that and take it over to get those resources for themselves? In our case, in a moral or a less than honest way.
And yeah, honestly, World War I is a great example of that. World War I was above all a war against monarchy. It was the imposition of democracy over and the destruction of every prominent monarchy. And you're like, they just knew that monarchy. Even if they didn't
explicitly say this.
Yeah, even if they didn't explicitly say it, they at least subconsciously knew that monarchies were at least more fair and more efficient and less exploitative of their subjects, and they got rid of every prominent monarchy. We still have monarchies today, and I guess the countries that are more monarchic tend to be the best countries, but they're just not prominent enough for it to be a problem to the establishment, so I guess they just leave them be, because I guess at this point just doing a regime change in Liechtenstein would not be the best optics, but yeah, back then that's what it was. They just destroyed the systems that were more efficient because they knew that people would want them back.
Yep. So it's also kind of interesting that Mises goes into this in this section, talks about how the freedom of the individual is limited, because you see a lot of libertarians basically say that since the freedom of the individual is limited, so such and such is true, especially the people who are against hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's like, oh, people are forced into hierarchies or anything like that, and it's just like, good. Well, what are you gonna do to stop that? It's not like you can just get rid of scarcity.
We don't believe in scarcity, remember? We live in post-scarcity. That's their only fucking argument.
Yep. And not just anyone's argument. Taylor might not know exactly who I'm referring to, but there are some quote-unquote free market people that basically use this argument against hierarchy. And it's a shame, because they are very good on economics and other fronts, but then when they get to hierarchy, they're just like, oh, well, obviously you can't have that.
Are you referring to the agorists?
Some of the more educated ones.
Yeah. It's just what a problem I always had was the same that Rothbard had. It's just like, how can you claim to be for private property, capitalism, entrepreneurship if you don't believe in wage labor or private hierarchies? I mean, that's just I don't understand it. I never have, and I've tried. And it's just like, there were times when I was like agorist curious because, it seemed to be like the cool thing that the ANCAPs were doing at the time. And I was just like, this is absurd. And plus it's left libertarian bullshit, but I just thought that it was absurd to assume that in a fully free market society that wage labor would be A, eradicated, and B, society would be completely run by entrepreneurs.
Yep. This is actually kind of a revealing of something I'm writing in an article, but basically at the end of the article, I talk about how agorists say that they're just ANCAPs that have a method to create ANCAPistan. And I kind of say that, like, okay, fishing without a license, no ANCAP is really going to be that offended by it. But it's very, very controversial to be an agorist in ANCAP circles. And so you have to think, well, if it's just about fishing without a license or, smoking weed or whatever it is, how is it so controversial? This is kind of what feminism does. They say, oh, it's just about equality between the sexes, which almost everyone agrees with, yet like a fourth of the people that agree with the basic premise of feminism, as the feminists will tell you what the basic premise is, aren't feminists. Yeah. And so there's just this giant disconnect between their marketing and how people are reacting to it. And so there's a lie there. And in my article, I'll talk about the lie. Well, I've already written an article talking about the lie, but the second article will really go into a giant flaw with agorism. And so it's just so yeah, it's but I just thought that lie was something to point out, and it's good to get people amped up to read my articles.
Yeah. Again, like it's just your last article on it was great, and it was pretty much just going along with Rothbard's critique of the whole thing. And it's just like it is really discouraging to see that so many ANCAPs are so quick to take the agorist pill just because they think that counter economics is somehow what agorism is, and they haven't read the book. And it's like yeah, go ahead, take the black and gray pill, but at least read the book, for Christ's sake, please.
Well, no, they will because they will take the counter economics, and everything that they say about society being run by entrepreneurs comes from the same premise that counter economics comes from. Once they get you to accept counter economics, they can show you the premise, and it's like, well, since this is true, the premise of it should be true, and then I can get you to be anti-hierarchy, because the premise is basically that hierarchies are inefficient and evil. Yeah,
which I never got. I mean, it's just historically, again, to use my favorite term, historically autistic.
Well, we should all be growing tomatoes and selling weed to one another forever.
So there is some feedback when Taylor speaks. I have a great meme about this that I posted to some lefty last year. It is Thanos, but with a black bar above his eyes, and it just says hierarchy. And it's him about to snap his fingers saying, "I am inevitable."
Hard.
And it's just like, you have to, like, people naturally go into hierarchies. And if your ideology requires the creation of a new libertarian man, or a new socialist man, or just generally changing the nature of people generally, you have a failed ideology. You have to accept people as their nature is. You can't just say, well, everyone's got to change to be part of my ideology. That's never going to happen.
We're gonna get into that soon, I think, with the beginning of chapter 4, where he talks about he briefly mentions how ideologues just daydream and turn those daydreams into actual philosophy. And I know that I posted that quote in the group chat, and then it immediately became useful because I had to use it at a Libertarian Party tweet.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's section 4. Sorry, I'm not sure if it's the beginning of chapter 4, but I think it is.
But Grime and Nocti have been talking about all of this, and I've just kind of missed this entire thing.
Yeah. So okay, where are you? We're in.
Well, it's section 2, success on the book market.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This is
So-
gonna be our longest episode ever.
Yep.
Again, this is all my fault.
And mine.
Yep, so there is a flaw in this view. Literature is not conformism, but dissent. No one wants to hear a mere repetition of what they already know and believe. Whatever one may think of Marx and Nietzsche, there is no denying their posthumous success. The tycoon of the book market is the author of fiction for the masses. Most books today are trash, but that is because there are thousands of volumes written every year. The masses don't prefer bad books to good, but they are indiscriminate. This would be an age of flowering literature if 1 out of every 1,000 books were the equal of the great books of the past. Many critics blame capitalism for what they call the decay of literature, but should they not inculpate their own inability? Inculpate their own inability for sifting the chaff from the wheat. And there is a. So this is actually a good point to all the people that say that capitalism creates trash in the literature and arts, is that there is actually good literature being made. It's just that they can't find it. And so it's not so much that these critics of literature have nothing good to read. It's just that they can't actually find it. Like, they can't figure out what is the good and what is the bad.
Yeah.
Same
it's
with
just,
music.
I think that books and music and etc. are not the most obvious example of this, because since they're easier to make than, say, a cathedral, there's going to be a lot more of them in total. And because of capitalism, It just made it a lot more accessible for people to get into these things, because they're able to do them as a hobby, because they have a much higher standard of living. But it also enabled people to live from this if they wish to. It's not the easiest thing to do. It's still difficult to become a full-time artist or a full-time writer, but it's possible. It's definitely a lot more possible now than it ever was. And it's just,
and Mises continues.
you have a lot more literature and a lot more art in total, and because of that, of course, you have a lot more trash, because you have a lot more people making it, and obviously not everyone's going to be great at it. But
Right.
a
So
lot of people
you might
who
have
would not otherwise have access to this are still going to be able to get into it, and those people might be very good. So, just think about the past and all of these great artists that we had in the past. Well, there are probably a lot of great artists, or would-be great artists, who never got into it because they didn't have the opportunity in the past. And we know that there are a lot of people who did get into it and even come to prominence that are just trash, even in the past.
So this inability to sift, all the critics in Mises' time had praise for Stendhal, but when Stendhal died in 1842, he was very obscure and misunderstood.
Yep.
So he actually comes back to the point that capitalism rendered the masses able to buy all of these books and fund this entire literature industry, but it did not give them the discernment of Maecenas or Con Grande della Scala.
Well, this is a great example of books that are valued way, or music that is valued way later than whenever they were actually around. I can't even name you how many bands that I know now that are some of my favorite bands that nobody gave a shit active, and that's where it didn't make them any money or anything like that, but they were still valuable contributions outside of their actual success.
Yeah, and
Right,
while we're talking
I
about
agree.
music, just a quick add on to what he said. Just because the most popular music, and this goes for a lot of other types of art as well, but specifically about music, just because the most popular forms of music are not going to be the best, they're obviously going to be very commercial types of music, but just because those types exist and just because they're popular doesn't mean that other types of like good music and good bands and good genres exist. In fact, there's a lot of bands who are only able to get on record labels and be funded by record labels because much more popular bands exist. That label has money to invest in smaller projects.
That's a great point. Literally, the reason why record labels are able to sign smaller bands that they actually like is because they sign bands that they know are going to blow up and pay their bills.
Yeah. Just imagine how many Led Zeppelins were signed in the 60s and 70s, and only maybe one. I mean, obviously one, but only a few of them actually blew up. But the ones that did blow up gave the opportunity for a lot of people to, I guess, go after their dreams of making music, even if it didn't work out for them.
Yeah.
We're seeing that a lot right now in the metalcore scene with, for the longest time, it was just risecore garbage. And now that there's been this, revival going on, people are going back and finding all these bands from back in the day that hardly got any attention and are just like, man, I wish these dudes were still around. They were so sick. And now there's a whole bunch of, bands coming back, because it's such a recent, I guess, genre anyway.
It's just because kids that weren't around in 2011, 2012. I mean, I was, and I remember, but I also remember. But there's a lot of kids. There's a lot of kids who go back and listen to that stuff, and they're just like, "Yo, this shit was sick. I wish I could have seen this band." And I was just like, "Well, I did, and they weren't great, but that's awesome that you want to pay to see them." And there is there's a shelf life to things, and there also is a rate of growth whenever you don't even exist. And that is some sort of economic analysis that I really don't even know how to make, but it does hint at it here, to where this guy was misunderstood and he made no money. And I mean, a great example of this outside of music is what's the horror writer? Space guy.
Oh.
Lovecraft.
Yeah, H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, that dude died broken, coked up.
Also, Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe also died in a hole.
They don't even know how he died. They just found him.
Yeah, they just found him dead. He was probably drunk or syphilis or something. But yeah, I mean, that's just art. And that is where art is almost outside of economics. But am I feeding back bad on somebody's shit?
Yeah.
I think it's emo.
Turn me down.
I can hear you.
He's on his phone. I don't think he can. That's the issue with him being in where he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting feedback. I'm going Howard Stern right now. Turn the radio off. But yeah, I mean, even with H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe, guys who were broke at the time that they died. People really did, value their work. I mean, I'm a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan. I love that shit. It's corny.
Same, dude.
To love that shit now, it's corny. But honestly, it's just some of the most wonderful horror works inside of poetry that could ever be made.
This whole critique just tells you that there is a entrepreneurial task that needs to be done to find good bands and bring them out into people's, the mainstream.
Absolutely. Or even like people that don't want to be mainstream, at least making sure that they get, paid enough to go wherever they need to go. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, at least if it's going to be quote unquote the underground scene, there needs to be some way of telling the underground scene like what's going, what band is up and coming and such.
Absolutely.
But so apparently, this is an entrepreneurial thing that needs to be done, and this is actually the great thing about Austrian economics is that they separate out economics and entrepreneurialism. Economics can't tell you what the price of a good should be, but you can figure that out through entrepreneurialism.
Yep.
And what is, like, this is always something that I have pondered but never really brought up. How do, like, the Keynesians or even, like, the Chicagoites explain the economics of the music or art industry? It really, really has to be a tough case for them. Because you have Andy Warhol painting a fucking can of tomato soup, and he makes a ton of money off of that. And you have bands that don't put that much effort in that blow up. And then you have bands that bust their ass and artists that bust their ass that don't make any money. And there has to be some form of subjective theory that to justify this, and they don't really have it.
Yep. I think they would say that this is where people's rationalism fails them, and they just start acting on emotions.
Ugh, that's such a poor explanation.
If the labor theory of value worked, prog and tech bands would be like
Mainstream.
everybody would be listening to them. It would be the genre everybody was listening to.
King Crimson on the radio every day.
Yep.
Oh, please, God, I wish I lived in that reality.
Ugh, I couldn't listen to Dream Theater for more than 10 minutes, dude.
Oh no, I can't do Dream Theater. I hate James' voice. Musically, I like them, but I hate their singer.
Yeah. Low T music.
Label theory of value. I haven't played guitar since I was 16, but apparently if I got up on stage, everyone should love listening to me.
Well, it's funny that I've played shows in front of like a good amount of people, like 100 to 125 people, at most, which isn't much for like, for most bands, but for like a hardcore band, that's a lot. And like there are people who are way better musicians than everyone in my band that try way harder, that can't draw that kind of people because it's not about how often you practice. It's not how hard you try to write good songs. It's just about how much you can appeal to people and how much they can value your, labor in this case, or value your work or your art.
Yeah, and if you still in the music industry, there's also a lot of people who are just amazing players. They are like
right.
Great
This goes
players, but goes
back to Mises's point. It is not good performance, but performance that is recognized as good. That gets money.
Yeah. You just take these people who are not actually that good at music itself, but they're great entertainers, and they make content that makes people excited and makes people, I guess, want to come back for more, and that's more valuable. That can be more valuable than the music itself. That's why you have bands like Motley Crue, who musically speaking are not exceptional, but they're great performers, they're great entertainers, and that's why people keep coming back.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I think it's time to go to section 3.
Yeah.
Remarks about detective stories. The age in
This
which
chapter
the
was
radical...
funny.
Okay, so the age in which the radical anti-capitalist movement acquired seemingly irresistible power brought about a new literary genre, the detective story. One would have to call the detective story, along with Hollywood pictures, comics, and the art of striptease, the artistic superstructure of the epoch of labor unionism and socialization. So, that's actually a really, really interesting, because he's going back into what we talked about in last episode of how these progressives have gone into the arts and have used the arts to basically propagandize the masses into anti-capitalist mentalities. And he's going to go into this in the rest of this section. So he's basically harkening back to something he's written previously in this essay. The reader of such stories is frustrated that he did not attain the station in life his ambition drove him to. He is prepared to console himself with blaming capitalism's injustice if people only knew how crooked the people who succeeded are. The basic plot of the detective story is this: a man whom all people consider as respectable and incapable of any shabby action has committed an abominable crime. The clever sleuth knows that such sanctimonious hypocrites knows that such sanctimonious hypocrites and assembles the evidence to convict him. The good cause triumphs. So this is basically what Mason is describing here is the man's envy and hatred of people who have done better than him in capitalism, because everyone in capitalism, it's a meritocracy. The people who do better than you are just better than you. And so people get envious and hate these other people. And so they need to come up with reasons for why they didn't succeed while other people did. And this is basically a fantasy about that, is what Mises is talking about, which I think is very interesting. He's basically just throwing shade on everyone that reads detective stories. Not everyone. He does at the end say that
there are
some
other
people,
readers, there are other
those other readers. But he's basically just throwing shade, which is basically this entire book.
Yeah, why I thought this chapter was a little funny is because it feels a lot more specific than the other chapters. You know, the other chapters he's just talking, the book industry, the film industry, or that and that group of people. And this chapter he just, I guess, singles out this specific literary genre. And I think it was kind of funny.
I thought...
Yep, go ahead, Taylor. You get to speak about for 15 minutes now.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, like, I thought the same thing, where it was, like, oddly specific. Or it was just, like, he literally just read, like, a Sherlock Holmes book and was like, this shit sucks. That's all that I thought of the whole time. Where I was just like, what hurt you, dude? Like, where did this come from? But I get it. It's wonderfully argued. It just made me laugh.
Yeah, same.
Yep. Yeah, it's just saying, like, it's basically saying, like, you don't like that other people did better than you, and you need to find out if they did anything wrong whatsoever to achieve, their success. Going to be justified in it.
Yep.
Is basically.
Yep. So the unmasking of the crook who passes himself off as a respectable citizen was also treated with blatant anti-bourgeois tendency in higher literature, for example, by Ibsen in The Pillars of Society. The detective story debases the plot and introduces the self-righteous sleuth that can be a stand-in for the reader. And actually, this stand-in is something that you're seeing more and more in media. Like, if you look into the sequel trilogy in Star Wars, Rey, throughout the first two movies, is often just the stand-in for the audience. For instance, when she's picking up the lightsaber in The Force Awakens, and she's so awed by it, it has nothing to do... It's like she has no relationship to Luke. She's not in awe of it because of its meaning to her. She's in awe of it because the audience should be in awe of it. Because the
So
audience
that's a good
obviously knows what Luke's lightsaber looks like.
I want my money back.
Yeah, Disney apparently agrees with you because they have decanonized the sequel trilogy, and just so
Really?
yep, and they're going to pretend it never happened.
Are you serious?
Wait, so does that wait? So does that mean like the old novels are canon again, or is that still also not canon?
It's also not canon, but they're going to create something new.
The Last
just
Jedi
redo
was a good movie.
They're just
Yeah,
like, let's try this again.
Dude,
So that
no,
means I can just
go.
go by itself.
Wait,
If,
is it only the two?
No, there's three. There's also Revenge of the Sith. No, sorry, Return of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith was a prequel.
Yeah.
It's a great
The
movie.
Last Jedi was the only good movie out of the 3 sequels, and I will defend that to the death. And the rest of them were terrible.
So you need
but I
to go talk to Marlo about this and debate the law.
What?
I said he needs to go talk to Marlo about this and debate the law on EFAP.
yeah. I mean, I watched The Last Jedi the other day again. It's not that great. It's still the best out of the 3. But again, let's get back into Mises.
Yeah.
Okay, I still say you need to go on EFAP. Okay. So, this is why detective stories are popular with those who suffer from frustrated ambition. And again, Mises is just insulting people. Like, this is what most of the book is about. It's just Mises is going to be like, okay, I'm going to insult you and explain why the insult is true. Which you gotta love, because when you're reading Mises' more serious, I wouldn't say this is not serious, but his more academic literature, you don't get a sense of the man. So, Section 4, Freedom of the Press. Freedom of the press is a fundamental feature of a nation of free citizens. A free press can only exist where there is private control of the means of production. If this isn't the case, then the government decides what to print. The self-styled efficient of the Catholic Church, or liquidating of dissenters by the Soviets. Their foremost tool is boycotting. Hi, Mac. Everyone is free to abstain, but it's quite another thing to threaten other people with serious reprisals, should they not stop patronizing certain publications and publishers. In many countries, publishers are afraid of said boycotts by labor unions and tacitly give in to the demand of the labor bosses. These union leaders are more touchy than the imperial and royal majesties of old. Many plays were freely allowed in theaters that parodied the reigning monarch and imperial emperor in ancient times. Many such kings and emperors found the plays to be out of question to...
This is kind of contra Michael Malice, and I agree with him on most of this, but whenever Mises talks about how a free press is like having it be in private control means that it's more free. I think we've seen a muddying of that in today's age, but I don't know if in the past, in his day, it was better because they didn't have so many government representatives as a part of the press. Now, Michael Malice has a great thread even on Twitter about the New York Times defending the Soviet Union and blah, 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 and journalists never being good. But still, was it better back in his day whenever they, were truly private and didn't just have, a whole bunch of CIA guys just parroting a whole bunch of narratives?
Oh, the press was a lot less leftist in the 50s when this book was written. The press became increasingly leftist starting, I guess you could say, with the Vietnam War, and it's like all downhill from there. They just became more and more leftist over the decades, and so the problem is obviously a lot worse now. So I can only assume that back when this book was written, at least, it wasn't as nearly problematic as it is now. But what we also see is just that we have businesses, and especially these large media conglomerates, they've been exerting a lot more and more influence over culture with time. So it's, they just didn't have as much of an influence on actual behavior as they do right now, I guess.
Yep. Also, this is the end of my section, so who is it? Is it
Taylor.
It's me.
Hey. Ah,
Yeah, boy.
Yeah,
the
it's mine.
boy that barely speaks.
I've been talking a little more today, but yeah. Anybody have anything else to say about the end of section 4? I had a couple. Section 5 was a little bit more interesting than section 6. I have a little bit more quotes in section 5 than section 6, but there is a lot of valuable stuff in there, obviously. But does anybody have anything else to say about the end of section 4? About essentially the free press being actually more free and not just influenced by government propaganda or, woke capital.
No, leftists aren't funny. That's all.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, you can see that in a lot of stand-up specials on Netflix right now.
Oh God. Have you
Yeah.
seen real
Orange
quick? Have
Man
you ever
bad.
do you see what Comedy Central tries to put out like constantly now? I can't go past one ad without it being some like minority or a woman being like straight men bad. Like it's constant. There's
Well, I
nothing.
mean-
They don't put out anything that isn't like social justice propaganda
Oh, shit.
anymore.
I need to leave. I'll be right back.
All right.
Okay.
All right. I don't know if I should
But-
continue reading or we should talk about how bad Comedy Central is, because I legitimately haven't turned it on in a long time.
Just
we
go
can
on
we can do
reading.
that for a few minutes. Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll keep on reading. Okay, so one section I got here is let's see here. First part. The tremendous machine of progressive propaganda and indoctrination has well succeeded in enforcing its taboos. The intolerant orthodoxy of the self-styled unorthodox schools dominates the scene. And I just, as soon as I read this, I thought about the 3x5 card that Tom Woods always talks about, where they there's only so much acceptable thought, and it is dictated by leftist and mostly progressive terms, not actually leftist terms. I will be fair to the real left.
When I read this, I thought about a lot of things actually, but I think that the first thing that comes to mind is the word hipster, and you can just expand that to hippies in general, and it's just how these people will market themselves as anything that isn't the establishment, meanwhile being supported by the entire establishment. And I think there is no bigger culprit of this than the LGBT movement. You just wait every month, and every year until there's their little special month, and you will see that every single major corporation in the world is going to this. And they still continue to market, and they actually believe themselves to be unorthodox.
So the reason why I had to step out is because my neighbor wanted to give me my mail. The government USPS delivered it to the wrong house.
Epic.
Shocker.
So
Lysander Spooner posting.
yeah. So it's been an issue. Especially since I moved out here. It's so bad.
Yeah, we're talking
Anyways.
about how the progressive propaganda machine keeps marketing itself as unorthodox while being supported by basically the entire establishment.
Oh yeah, Star Wars is going to what is it? Subvert our expectations and bring about the feminist cause, and then it's being done by Walt Disney of all
Thank
fucking
you, Disney.
organizations.
Very cool.
And what a lot of people were bringing up, especially on among the right, not as much as my normie friends, is just like The Last of Us 2, how everyone was just like laughing at like the moments in the game that were like overt progressive propaganda, which I actually like. As much as I love the game, like it was just like I rolled my eyes a couple times. It just like where it was just like, you guys think that you're edgy because like you slit people's throats in the game, but like this is just so well accepted, and you think that you're actually pushing something that is like ballsy when the only people that are going to push back on you are a minority of right wingers who are more right wing than your typical part of the culture. But still, like, you're not pushing anything that's ballsy. You're saying everything that like is approved. Which chat?
The YouTube chat. Do you not have it open?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Look what Mario just sent.
He said Lysander Spooner was peak agorist counter-economics.
That back.
Lysander Spooner really he believed in the labor theory of value. Agorists don't. And I mean, counter economics in a way that opening up a competitor is somewhat part of like the concept of the agora. I wouldn't call him an agorist. I don't
the whole
justifying that even.
The whole agorist idea is that you're going to use completely non-hierarchical black markets to subsume the rest of the economy.
Yeah, and Lysander Spooner obviously had employees that would distribute the mail. There's no way that he himself just did it.
No. What we're going to have is complete contractual obligations, so that are totally not employees that will distribute mail for a central mail company that is one person.
Totally non-employees.
Yep. Nonsense.
They didn't get paid upon a contract. They didn't sign anything. They just, they ran that business themselves, but were working for someone else and were also distributed the mail from someone else. That they were totally non-employees.
No. The fact that there's a contract means that they're not employees.
My brain. I don't care what Lysander Spooner believed. What he believed is good enough for me to defend him with all the honor I can.
Yeah, no, he
don't care.
It's one thing to it's one thing to have wrong beliefs back in history, but it's a totally different thing to have wrong beliefs in the internet age while being in communication with Rothbard or Hoppe or Mises and all these other things,
Which is why I give Lysander Spooner more slack than most of today's new libertarians, because like the labor theory of value was very well accepted back in his day. I mean, like that was a fairly simple position to take, and he took a lot of positions that weren't easy to take. It was just some of his economics were based off of faulty principles that were later, refuted by Menger and von Bavrek. It's not a crazy thing to get beat on by somebody else that was better on you than economics, but to be right on other things. It's another thing to build off somebody who is better than you and be wrong.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, Konkin was building off Rothbard, and he was worse than Rothbard.
Like, von Bavrek and Menger were contemporaries of Spooner, but they spoke a different language on wanton communication. Meanwhile, you have guys like Konkin, who were in communication with Rothbard, and just like, no, I'm gonna be retarded.
Yeah, Lysander Spooner's natural law, like his I guess essay. I don't know. It's small, but his thing on natural law is just it's perfect to me.
Yeah.
So
It's also interesting. The thing I've noticed with many intellectuals is that they get one thing very, very well. They get one thing right, and they just kind of like try to apply it to everything else, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just taints everything else. It's monism. I don't know if you know what that is, but let me just explain it for the chat. So monism is basically treating two separate fields as if they are like the same field of study. And this is essentially what the Friedmanites and the Chicago School and the Keynesians do. They take physical sciences and assume that you can just treat
Okay.
not realizing that, like electrons don't really have free will while people do, and this completely destroys this whole.
I just saw. I'm sorry, I had to interrupt. I saw. Bert Grimm said agorism is coming without a license.
Yeah, Emo, you cut out a little bit, but yeah, he said that agorism is coming without.
Yep. Oh, that's what
I'm
I was
sorry.
chuckling about like half an hour ago.
Yeah.
I just saw it. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. Shut up, Bert. Good dude. Backed hard. But all right. So the next section talks about just the socialist creed. The fundamental dogma of this creed declares that poverty is an outcome of iniquitous social institutions. The original sin that deprived mankind of the blissful life in the Garden of Eden was the establishment of private property and enterprise. Capitalism serves only the selfish interests of rugged exploiters. It dooms the masses of righteous men to progressing impoverishment and degradation. So, I mean, this part is just a part of today's another thing that's very, very relevant today, even among people that aren't Marxists, is viewing, the people who are providing the outlets for production, providing the means of production as being, exploiters, and that their only role is to make themselves richer while taking advantage of all of their workers and the consumers that they serve. Now, they wouldn't even say that they serve consumers, progressives or Marxists. They're not even really, I would say, different in this view. That, they just think that they have these billions of dollars automatically, and that they just take advantage of everyone, not looking at how they built that wealth or how they invested that capital whatsoever.
Yeah. You see that a lot, even among.
Yeah.
You see that.
Sorry, I'll return in just one moment.
Okay. You see that a
Got
lot
you.
among the right as well. It's not from the exact same point that the Marxists come from, but it's a similar mistake, and which is that, and I saw this just the other day talking with a mutual on Twitter, which is how the third positionists and I guess capitalism is that they are unable to separate the advocates of capitalism and the people who actually hold capital goods in large quantities. I guess you could call them the capital owners, which are, I guess, at this currently are the big multinational conglomerates. And they will just take the heads of these conglomerates or the companies themselves and see that a lot of them are doing bad things with the money. And they will assume that because of that, capitalism is unfair and capitalism is anti-traditionalist or whatever. And the mistake is that they don't they fail to acknowledge that, or at least refuse to acknowledge that most of these corporations are actively anti-capitalist. Because they already hold large amounts of capital, they have a lot of interest in reducing economic freedom so that they can more easily maintain that, because they will have a lot less competition. And they just see that all of these atrocities that are being committed by multinational conglomerates and Bilderberg attendees and etc. And they'll just say, "Oh no, these people are capitalists. These people, when you advocate for free markets, this is what you're advocating for. This is the natural outcome of capitalism," or whatever. They'll just completely fail to acknowledge that capitalism is an economic model, and they'll just say, "Oh no, when Jeff Bezos votes for open borders, that's capitalism." And it's the same mistake that the Marxists make, except the Marxists are somehow even more wrong, because they attack these corporations on the basis that they're not providing their workers a living standard, when in reality their very existence is what allows their workers to have access to such goods that we have today that we didn't have back then with such ease. So yeah, it's just the good old argument of, "Oh no, it's these people are bad because they have more money than us," or "These people are bad because they have more money than us, but also have different values than us."
Yeah, and like you said, you see that a lot on the right now, and the left, wherever. Now that we're especially seeing on Twitter the rise of the Nazbol crowd, which is something that is, I want to say, a phenomenon of the past maybe 2 years. Maybe whenever Spencer started to get a little bit more, socialistic, it started to send people down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I've noticed. I've noticed most of the right-wing people I know who aren't really based in economics have been more accepting of this. Like, there's this Constantine guy I've known for years, and all of a sudden, if you're not a statist at this point, then what are you doing? And it's just like, I can't keep on following you.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points to be made here. Not 2 points, just one main point is that I guess since things are getting worse and worse, people start to crave more and more pragmatism. They just want anything, any quick solution, any light at the end of the tunnel, any hint of a light at the end of the tunnel, and they'll just go for less and less. And that's why people start to move to flock towards movements such as America First, which is a single step away from neocons, and they'll just become more desperate for immediate action, and thus more distanced to their actual principles, or actual right-wing principles.
Right.
Yeah,
so
and that's
Mario says they can never answer why people who the most are the supposed capitalists themselves.
Yeah, that's the point that I always make. So, and the other thing that I wanted to say was that this I guess anomaly that is the rise of National Bolshevism and these other third positionist ideologies that are just completely Marxist friendly. This comes from not from them liking Marxism, even though a bunch of them are just communist infiltrates, but it doesn't come from because of they like Marxism, but it just comes because they've grown so much disdain towards capitalism that they think that they need to align with Marxists in order to
time preference ideologies.
Yeah, literally. And when the entire point of your wing is being low time preference, we always care about civilizational progress rather than quick economic gibs. When you just increase the time preference, you just distance yourself from the right as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even like the National Bolsheviks, who Bolsheviks, they claim to be like this, like, oh yeah, Marxism is based because it's anti-capital, and but like they ignore all of the critiques. I'm assuredly these people came from free market roots, and they literally waited maybe a year, and they were just like, well, this isn't working, so I have to adapt the economics of the left that I supposedly hate in order to them, which I
in order
can
to combat capitalism.
as much as I talk about how bottom unity, like left libertarians and right
Bottom
libertarians
unity is
are philosophically like incoherent, there is no way that I could ever justify in my brain top right social philosophy with I guess bottom left Marxism, unless these people are actually like Stalinist.
No, they're like
Wow.
they're like Stalinists. Yeah, they're like
Yes,
Nazis.
so these Dugenists and all these third and fourth positionists are top unionists. Top
Yeah.
unionists.
Okay, so they're pretty much just all like Strausserists and Duganist shit. Okay. All right. Yeah, I didn't know. I really don't pay attention to them that much because I literally just look at it as weaponized.
It is.
I just really I never gave it that much of a mind because I thought that it's ridiculous. I mean, you can't call yourself an anti-egalitarian if all of your economics are based on egalitarianism.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk a little bit about this. So I'm just gonna post an image here, and I'll put it up on the stream as well because it's gonna help illustrate the point, which is why both top unity and bottom unity are completely ridiculous. I'm gonna post it here on the Discord on the book club channel, and then I'll put it up on the stream as well. People are very used now to that meme compass, like the 4-quadrant compass. Wait, this image is edited. Let me get the original one because there's a line drawn in that one. But yeah, people are just I guess if you just take like the most extreme Stalinist and the most anarchist ANCOM possible, they are both still just they agree on the same basic principles of Marxism, which is that private property should eventually be abolished, and so they're still gonna conflate to the same ends, even if they disagree on the means. And you just can't say the same thing about the right, because the right actually has two different polar opposites, which are the people who believe in individualism and libertarians, and the people who believe in absolute order and hierarchy, which are the traditionalists, absolutists. And that is why the right has so much difficulty on fighting the left, because the left is a lot more naturally united. So any leftist ideology that they push for is going to please more of the left. Meanwhile, you have all these libertarians complaining about authoritarian this, authoritarian that, and you have all these other right-wingers complaining about capitalism this, capitalism that. And that's why right-wing unity is, while it is important in my opinion, especially right now, it's a lot more different than left-wing unity.
Right. Yeah. That's a good graph to talk about that. I personally like the 6 triangles test.
I just put it on the stream, by the way. I was trying to find the proper image. I just put it up for the people who are wondering what I'm talking about.
Okay. So yeah, I like the 6 triangles better. I think it is proper in terms of what it is. The only thing that it doesn't really have is things that are more culturally based than just strict government in terms of the six triangles. So
Yeah.
that one triangle though, it actually it is fairly good with talking about like why the right and left are so different essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, just
And
the one point that I wanted to make is just, you're always going to have a lot more ideological disparity between right wingers than left wingers, and that's why right wing unity is a lot more difficult. Personally, I no longer call myself an ANCAP. At this point I just go by NRX or neo-reactionary. I don't really want to adhere to any strict ideology names, so I just go by this broader set of values that is neo-reaction. And I think that there are very important roles in both of these corners of the right. There is a very important emphasis on order and hierarchy that the more authoritarian kinds preach, which is often ignored by most libertarians, but there's also a lot of importance in economic freedom and individual liberties that the individualists and ANCAPs preach that is often ignored, especially by the fascist types. The monarchist types not as much, but yeah. I think that both of these things are important, but they're also in a lot of ways conflicting. So if you were just asking me, how do you fix the right? How do you make the right unite? And how do you make it so we are actually able to get shit done? I would say just take all of the fascists and just take all of the traditionalists and authoritarian monarchists and just make them shut up about economics. And then you just take all the libertarians and make them shut up about culture. And that would be the ideal right for me. But yeah, that's not gonna happen. It's just that split is always going to exist. I just think we need to learn how to deal with it better. Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I think this is a good enough for a tangent. I think we should get going in the actual thing.
Yeah.
Because based on our notes, we're about halfway through.
Yeah, I'm gonna skip over a couple on my part 6 too. I'm just gonna go over the 2 points that Mises made in part 6 about the bourgeois and the proletarian playwriters, but that's in the future. Who knows how long it'll take us to get there. So the next section that I wanted to highlight is talking about the goals of the interventionists and the leftists, credit expansion and increasing the amount of money in circulation, minimum wage rates to be decreed and enforced either by the government or by labor union pressure and violence, control of commodity prices and rents, and other interventionist measures. But the economists have demonstrated that all such nostrums fail to bring about those results which their advocates want to attain. So, essentially what he's saying is that the goals of the intervention, I probably should have included a sentence or two before that, but I was just, highlighting that part, is that the progressives and the interventionists and the leftists think that the goals, their egalitarian goals, will be met by, increasing money production and minimum wage rates and, labor union pressure, especially on the hard left, when it actually results in less prosperity. And we've seen evidence of this in history and in current times as to, just by even Austrian measures like simple deductive analysis without any tables or anything like that, to where their methods are entirely separated from their goals in terms of results, not in terms of, principle.
Yep.
And that's pretty much, that's just basic, that's just basic Misesian stuff. I'm sure we could talk about that for a while, but I mean, it's at face value. I mean, like if you're coming from a priori, deductive reasoning, Austrian economics, you understand that the progressives are positivists, talking about all schools of positivism that believe that their interventions can somehow correct the faults of, capital, and while capital does not have the issues that they label it as having.
That's not actually just the socialists. It seems to be any logical positivist, as the Chicago School is also all about that.
That's why I said all logical positivists. I knew you were going to pick up on that.
Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell, like, they have these weird, like, policy suggestions that, like, are somehow a mix of, quote-unquote free market principles, but then they're like, yeah, but the government should do it. And it's just so weird. Like, Thomas Sowell was behind, in favor of all of these interventionist wars, and then Milton Friedman was the student debt crisis is actually a Milton Friedman policy and its consequences, and so on and so forth. Like, it's actually kind of frustrating because so much of what the left talks about free market economics, they can actually somewhat point to the Chicago School and be like, see, these guys are free market economics people, and then like they put their policies in place and we have all these issues, therefore free markets is to blame. And it's just like, I guess we have to make everyone an Austrian, because otherwise, the left is going to be able to point to quote-unquote free market people.
One of my favorite things that the left points to as like going against free market economics is Hayek and Friedman advising Pinochet, and I'm like, A, base, and B, I mean, like the monetarist experiment was it was a boon, but I mean it was just like Austrians have critiques of that also. Like, free market schools don't just go like, oh yeah, this was a pure free market experiment. Like, it was literally just about like monetarism. It's about like controlling of interest rates, blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just free market banking. It's not just private property. Like, it's literal top government, policy on what is viewed to be free market from the Chicagoites or the Hayekians.
Right, and so that's what I'm kind of getting at, is that the left can basically point at the Hayekians in the Chicago School and be like, see, all these policies were supported by these people. They're free market people, and therefore the free market is to blame. And it's just like,
imagine how many people would have died if Hayek hadn't advised Pinochet, though. They didn't need to die, though.
Right. So imagine the
like, he wasn't perfect.
The success of Chile was only in comparison to socialism.
Literally. Like, we're not saying it's a perfect, like, oh yeah, it's a free market paradise. It's like, they call it the, like, what is it, Chilean miracle or something like that they usually refer to it as. I mean, it went from some place where they didn't have food to having like some form of prosperity in a short amount of time compared to most regimes. And that's why they call it a miracle. It's not some sort of like utopia. I mean, it's just like that's what, like, I actually give like Hayek credit for having the balls to do it. But I mean, like, for being a social democrat himself, for, advising Pinochet, who was, an authoritarian right-wing guy, at least they pointed them in the right direction so people didn't starve. Yeah, people died, but it wasn't because of starvation.
Yep. And from this, because we are all logical positivists here, we can say that right-wing death squads cause prosperity.
based.
Now we're talking.
The physical removal of communists allows for the private production of goods and services.
I hope somebody finds that clip of me saying that and tries to cancel me. That'd be great.
This you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me, bro.
No, that I don't know if like people say that in y'all's areas, but like here, if like you get caught like saying something you probably shouldn't have, according to them, you'll just get a this you.
Oh, this you?
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
that's
is this
on
you?
our Twitter.
All right. Yeah, basically that's how it goes. This you? All right, I'll see you.
Yeah. It's all ridiculous. And yeah, I go back and forth from my alias and my real name on these chats anyway, so who cares? Come and find me, fuckers. All right, so let's move on from basic Austrian shit. I'm gonna skip over the next note that I have because it's the same thing that we were just discussing. It's about, how progressives talk about how everything is two groups fighting over national income, blah blah blah. So it's just about, the distribution of resources without actually thinking about how those resources are acquired or produced. So the question is also whether socialism can be considered as a substitute for capitalism, whether any rational conduct of production activities, i.e. conduct based on economic calculation, can be accomplished under socialist conditions. The bigotry and the dogmatism of the socialists manifest themselves in the fact that they stubbornly refuse to enter into an examination of these problems, which goes back to the chat the streams that me and Colton did. The stream that me and Colton did that felt like 90 streams, where they can just disregard, like they just say that like, oh, marginal utility doesn't exist. It's bourgeois science, or that economic calculation under socialism doesn't need to happen because economic calculation is unnecessary under socialism. And I just like, it's like, okay, so you're refuting our claims by just saying that they don't happen under your system.
Just so you know, we have at least 16 more hours of that to go.
Oh, I know. Don't worry. I'm ready. Putting in a couple shifts. That's all.
Yeah. Oh shit. Never mind.
But yeah, that's essentially what it's. I mean, it's really again just Austrian 101. Like, it's just like economic calculation is impossible under socialism. Mises, wrote the book on it, literally called Socialism. Like, it's impossible, and their only way to refute this, and they are not interested in any sort of discussion of this, except for that paper that we are discussing, which is against bourgeois science, or against bourgeois economic science, where they literally just try and make a case against any sort of these points of economic inquiry, but it's failing. I mean, it's just 100% failing. It's just leading. It's positivist. It's just not good.
I do like that article is out there, because I think it perfectly demonstrates what the socialists believe, and therefore by refuting that, we can just refute everything that they believe.
Yeah, it's laid out there for us.
I mean, the Hoppe has the Eras of Marxism that I think everyone should watch, but that's more axiomatic in its presentation. Well, this is just talking about economics, and we can just like talk about economics and why their economic ideas are just completely counter-economical.
Yeah, I literally can't wait to go over the section where they try and talk about how marginal utility doesn't exist, because that is absurd. That might actually be the most absurd thing, where they try and like refute Menger by saying that marginal utility doesn't exist. Which, I mean, you could come up with a million examples as to why marginal utility is valuable. Even the Keynesians talk, which is, I guess, one of their cases against marginal utility themselves is just like, oh, it's not just an Austrian thing, it's a Keynesian thing too, and we don't like the Keynesians, blah, 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 blah.
Well,
like, it's just like...
the neoclassicals, the Keynesians, the Chicago people, the Austrians, they all use marginal utility.
Yeah, it's been incorporated into mainstream economics for a good reason. Like, yeah, they don't accept a lot of what the Austrians say, but marginal utility is incredibly important to all economic inquiry. And trying to make the case against marginal utility existing is one that I cannot wait to read, because there is, that's just one of those things where you read it and you're just like, oh yes, this makes 100% logical sense.
Yep. Anyways, is there anything left in part 5?
Nothing left that I really felt was that valuable, other than, those were all that I highlighted.
It's kind of funny because I just noticed a bunch more people are watching now than they were like half an hour ago, and yes, we are still going. So let's get to part 6, and maybe we can finish this before it hits the 4-hour mark.
Hey, check the chat real quick.
Yeah, I am. I don't see anything new.
No, you're good.
I didn't. No, I mean, in the book club chat.
Oh, okay. Discord.
In the Discord.
Yeah. No, I think you're good, dude. Because I don't see anything interfering with mine. Yeah, pretty much. Section 6, part 6 of this chapter is about bourgeois versus proletarian novels. And I'm just going to highlight this one section that Mises discusses.
Oh yes, I do remember that. The whole cuckoldry of the communists.
Yeah, and he talks about how both the classes of the left of the Marxists in this case talk about capitalism in their form of art, which is in this case a book. So I'm just going to read this first paragraph that I thought was important, which is, their novels and plays are designed as case studies for the demonstration of this Marxian dogma. What is wrong with these authors is not that they choose to portray misery and destitution. An artist may display his mastership in the treatment of any kind of subject. Their blunder consists rather in the tendentious misrepresentation of social conditions. They fail to realize that the shocking circumstances they describe are the outcome of the absence of capitalism and the remnants of pre-capitalistic past, or the effects of policies sabotaging the operation of capitalism. So, we even see that in art today.
It's central to any critique. Actually, look at circumstances. You see circumstances and it's like, oh, just blame capitalism. Don't think about it at all.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and then he just goes on to talk about how both classes of Marxist writers depict their experiences in different ways. One coming from the rich side, the bourgeois writers that talk about how the plight of the poor man, and then writing from the proletarian, which is about the pig capitalist who's a drunk, a rapist, whatever you want to talk about it as, just an exploiter in any way. And just how they try to paint any form of someone who is successful or that owns a business as some sort of horrible person. And that's pretty much the entire this entire section is just about how bad capitalists are as people and how they depicted it in art. And again, it's something that we see to this day. What's the game series that's literally a critique of Ayn Rand? Shit.
Oh, you mean the Rothbard play that he made?
No. I'm talking about the video games. It was. It's not Fallout. Oh, hold on. And now I'm all good with critiquing Ayn Rand. Don't get me wrong.
But
Bioshock.
Bioshock. Oh, right.
Bioshock is like a critique of like an objectivist society, in their view, and even when playing those games, it just seems fairly ridiculous. And like I said, I'm all good with critiquing the objectivist point of view and the objectivist view of society, but it's just constant strawmen and painting the people who would bring the sort of economic prosperity that is depicted as those that are evil and that would, kill whoever is necessary to get there.
Yep. So I don't know how many of you follow Razorfist, but he actually talks about how progressives drip their progressivism into art. And when they go full progressive in their films, it is rejected by the masses. However, so long as you just put a couple drops of progressivism in there, the masses will accept it and become ever more progressive. And this is precisely what Hollywood has been doing ever since the 30s, when they took control from the capitalists like Walt Disney and bought the guilds and labor unions into full force. So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
this is why I basically don't watch movies.
I haven't watched TV in forever.
That's my problem, is because I genuinely, like, I'm a big hater to one point, but I try not to bring my political or economic biases into my critiques of that art, which is why, like, whenever me and you talk about The Last Jedi, or whenever I talk about like The Last of Us Part 2, or whenever we talk about Bioshock, like all three of those things I enjoy. And yes, I rolled my eyes at times, but like I really, really try to avoid critiquing that art on the basis of whether it agrees with my worldview. But Mises makes a great case here in this section for these people just being clowns. And I tend to agree with him, but I can still enjoy the art while laughing at them as intellectuals.
Well, the thing is I think you need to go onto EFAP.
You keep suggesting that. I'll probably have to look into it.
EFAP is a video critique channel that is usually about 8 hours long, the live stream. However, their guests are usually only there for an hour or two. The guests, it's not because like they have time slots, it's because the guests can't just be there for 8 hours. And so yeah, that's I'll treat that. So
yeah, but quick tangent before we move on to my notes and such. But like, how have y'all ever, like, when you became an anarchist, or I don't know if y'all like Law and Order shows like SVU and stuff like that, but I used to love that stuff. And now that I've become an anarchist, ANCAP, whatever, I watch these shows and I'm constantly just like, no. It's like, I just watch it and I'm just like, this is like statist indoctrination. And I can't help it. I try to keep my biases out of it, but it's just like, I just watch it and I'm just like, there are any wrong things to do to get to the right thing, and it's bothering me.
Yeah, I don't watch these kinds of shows, but I do have a lot of difficulty keeping my personal political bias out of my tastes. There are a few things that I enjoy greatly, like Ian said, there are quite a lot of things that I greatly enjoy, but that I just avoid looking into because I know that the politics of it are just terrible.
Right, and so one of the things I keep on wishing I could have is a good movie series that comes from like Hoppe's theoretical history and his ideas about democracy and fascism and communism just being mass democracy. And I think that would be such a good fantasy, specifically science fantasy, a future fantasy type of setting.
I do too. I actually want there to be an anime like that. Like the closest I've gotten is the Saga of Tanya the Evil, and I'm about like one episode left in it.
By the
And
way,
it's
that's the creator of that is a Marxist.
really,
Yeah.
god damn it.
Yeah. I know, right? It's great. Don't get me wrong, it's great. I love Saga of Tanya the Evil, but yeah, the guy who made it is. I'm not sure if he's like a flat out Marxist, but he's a leftist. I know that.
Man.
I know that. 4chan was really disappointed when they found that out.
I mean, at this very second, like I'm kind of heartbroken.
No, it's still great. Have you watched the movie? Just wait until you watch
I
the
have-
movie, and your feelings will.
I haven't watched the movie yet. I watched like all 11 of the episodes, and I've been waiting for the moment where we start killing communists, but like I haven't seen it. It's been like Republicans.
Yeah,
And
no,
I'm just
watch
like,
watch
that's
the movie.
cool. Okay, the communists don't come till the movie then, right?
Yeah, watch the movie. You're gonna love it.
Alright, cool. I'll probably do that after this. But yeah, one final thing. So like there's a band that me and Taylor have discussed. I'm not gonna name them so people don't like come and hunt us down over it. But there's a I guess mathcore metalcore revival band that's really popular right now. And I found out that they're all like transgender anarcho-communists. And it's really frustrating because their lyrics are very like good, and you can like they come from an anarchist perspective, and it's not explicitly Marxist for real. But then you find out that they are, and then you just read the lyrics and you just have this feeling just like, man, I really, really, really love this band. Like they're hard, and
It's fucking like I'd even like talk to people. in
you
advance,
would
like,
read
fuck.
their lyrics. You would read their lyrics, and if you didn't know that they were ancoms, you'd be like, all right, this is cool, this is hard, there's not a whole lot I disagree, but then you hear, like, that they're ancoms, and then you read it, and you're just like, shit, he's talking about me.
So, I think
anyway.
I think this is the end of chapter 3.
Yes.
Yes.
So, chapter 4 is the non-economic objections to capitalism, and section 1 is the argument of happiness. And so, I think it is Emo actually that should take it away, right?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Alright, so, the argument of happiness. Critics of capitalism have two charges against it: that possession of goods don't make people happy, and that there are people who don't own these goods. Both are correct, but not to be blamed on capitalism. People do not work to achieve perfect happiness, but to alleviate as much uneasiness as possible in order to become happier than they were. A man would not buy goods such as a TV set if he did not believe he would be more satisfied and content without it. Doctors don't treat patients to make them happy, but to remove pain and put him in shape, all factors against his life and ease. So, what he's saying is that, it's true that goods don't make you happy. They only they do only temporarily alleviate the current uneasiness that you have, and you're happier than you were before. Or at least you think you would be happy than you were before having these goods.
What he's saying here is that it's easier to be happy when you're not starving.
Right. Right.
That's like the long story short. It's easier to be happy when you're not starving. And
Right.
capitalism
And as
makes it
things
so less people starve.
and as things progress, say like, and now there's news on the TV rather than on whatever ancient radio you have. You're gonna get you're missing out on information that you need to know by not having a TV or something and not being informed. So at a certain point, owning a TV will alleviate the uneasiness of not being, informed or even entertained as everybody else is being entertained. And, you could have everything you need food wise and everything like that, but you don't have entertainment. Well, there you go. You can go buy a TV and then happiness experienced all throughout history and mankind.
Has basically forgotten monasticism and Christianity. That even someone from Austria, like when they think of asceticism, they go instead of monks and nuns.
Yeah. The only thing I have to say about this section is that I found I laughed when he called Buddhist monks. I think he called them Asiatic beggars.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was funny.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting because it's also kind of interesting. I guess Buddhists would be best for the true like people who barely do anything, because even the monastics, like they do farming and they do like make last year about that came. She was
really?
like this new age Buddhist.
Like all the useless parts of everything.
When the last time I saw her, so that might have something to do with her not coming back. Is her yoga practice, because this was like 6 months before the Greek Church made their pronouncement against yoga.
Yeah.
I got removed from the chat for a second, but I'm back.
Yep.
Yeah.
But okay, let's.
Yeah,
I think we
let's
should
continue.
I had to go out to my car real quick. But yeah, let's continue. Most absurd criticisms is that technological and therapeutical innovations don't benefit all people. The changes in the human condition come into being by the energetic men who take the lead, and the rest of the humanity follows little by little. Innovation is a luxury of the few before it becomes within the grasp of many. It's nonsense to object to the use of shoes and forks, that they spread slowly, and that there are still millions without them. The first men and women who used soap were the harbingers of big-scale production of soap for the common man. If those today have the means to buy a television, yet abstain because others can't afford it, they would hinder rather than further the popularization of this contrivance. I don't know if I said that word right.
Yeah, so what he's saying here is that people buying more of a product helps that product become more popular and thus more accessible. So the more people that buy TVs means that the higher demand there are for TVs, the more TVs are going to be produced, and thus the cost of production will be lowered over time, and then so will be the prices. So the TVs will be more accessible for more people.
Yep, going back to Hazlitt's economics in one lesson.
Yep. So if people just stopped buying TVs because some people can't afford it, they're actually making it more difficult for TVs to become cheaper over time.
Yep.
So, I think it's time for section 2.
Yeah.
Yep. Materialism. There are those who blame capitalism for what they call its mean materialism. They can admit it has a tendency to improve the material conditions of mankind, but it has diverted men from higher and nobler pursuits. It feeds bodies, but starves the soul and the mind, and has decayed the arts. They claim that the days of the great poets, painters, sculptors, and architects are gone, and that only trash is produced. However, the judgments of art are subjective. Some praise what others disdain. There is no yardstick to measure the aesthetic work of a poem or building. There are people both delighted by grand cathedrals and unaffected by their appearance. There are people who are deeply into Hamlet and those who are bored to death by it. But those with mentality are fit to appreciate or add to this.
Not really. I just think that, just because more people have access to certain goods, and that those goods become popularized and thus of lower quality, doesn't mean that's a bad thing, because before they didn't have access to it at all. And I think it's in this part of the chapter or the book that he mentions old architecture as an example, which was largely funded by taxes, and thus not many people nowadays have, I guess, the capital required to just order something like that to be built, and that's why not a lot of actual wonders are built today. But that doesn't mean, that good architecture doesn't exist.
Right. So I guess moving on. This is where I don't know about these other people, but I know who Carlyle is, and I'm just assuming that Ruskin, Webbs, Bernard Shaw, and these people are. Would you say all these people are reactionaries, or are these just different people from different ideologies? Since we'd be considered neo-reactionary, I'm just curious before I go on.
Could you repeat that?
Huh?
Could you repeat that?
Besides Carlyle, being a known reactionary, would John Ruskin, the Webbs, Bernard Shaw, and whoever else he references, would these people also be considered reactionaries? Not just in art, but, other stuff.
I think this is mostly talking about the anti-capitalist, right? So,
Okay.
Yeah, it might be monarchists, it might be, traditional Tories, and it might be reactionaries. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, well, I'll move on then. John Ruskin, Carlyle, the Webbs, Bernard Shaw, and some others will be remembered as the gravediggers of British freedom, civilization, and prosperity. It was the writings of Ruskin that popularized the prejudice that capitalism, apart from being a bad economic system, had substituted ugliness for beauty, pettiness for grandeur, and trash for art. As people widely differ in the appreciation of artistic achievements, it is not possible to discuss artistic inferiority of the age of capitalism in the same apodictic way in which one may refuse the errors in logical reasoning or in the establishment of facts of experience. No man who is sane would be insolent enough to belittle the grandeur of the artistic exploits of the age of capitalism. The preeminent art of this age was materialism and money. The preeminent art of this age of materialism and money-making was music, novels, poems, and French painters. Neither has anybody ever contested that this age has encouraged all branches of scientific activities. But the complaint... hang on.
But the complainer... I see the issue here.
Is there another audio note moment?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyways, it's actually kind of interesting because I was just listening to yesterday about Jay Dyer talking about Protestants and how they have removed all beauty from their churches, and that Protestants are recognizing this finally and saying this is why people are moving to Orthodoxy. and how Jay Dyer and some other Orthodox people were just saying, isn't this just showing that beauty communicates truth, and that it is the beauty that is drawing people into truth? And it's just very, very...
This was mainly the work of specialists, while synthesis was lacking. Hardly misconstrue in a more the teachings of modern mathematics, physics, and biology. And what about the book? But it is routine. What gives value to a work of art is those features in which it differs from other works. This is called the style of a period. Let's see. And then I just lost my place. Okay, I found it. In one respect, the eulogists of the past seem to be justified. The last generations did not pass on their skills to the future. Such monuments as the pyramids, the Greek temples, Gothic cathedrals, and the churches and palaces of the Renaissance and the Barocco. I think, I don't know if I said that last word correctly, but whatever. In the last 100 years, many churches and even cathedrals were built, and many more government palaces, schools, and libraries, but they do not show any original conceptions. They reflect old styles and hybridize diverse old styles. Only in apartments, houses, office buildings, and private homes have we seen something develop that may be qualified as an architectural style of our age. Although it would be pedantic not to appreciate the peculiar grandeur of such sites, as it can be admitted, however, that modern architecture has not attained the distinction of that of past centuries, though. There are various reasons, and I think I did somehow copy and paste my notes in between someone else's. I don't know how. There wasn't anything there at first. What is that?
Oh, that was because you and Taylor were editing at the same time.
Nice.
F.
You see, this is the benefit of being the first one to make notes.
Yeah, once I get, I'm actually once I move into the house I'm moving, I'm gonna be buying a computer so I can actually sit at something and type stuff out rather than being on my phone holding a book and just typing on a small screen.
Target credit card.
Huh?
I said Target credit card is a lifesaver. No interest.
Oh, okay. I know what I'm doing my next off day. Yeah.
Before you continue, so while you sort your things out, I'm just gonna say this. I'm gonna pull this quote from Curtis Yarvin's latest newsletter that I think I already shared it in the group chat, but I think it's relevant to this. So, Curtis Yarvin's Moltbug, by the way, for those who don't know. The ideal future neither continues the present nor recreates the past. A nation is neither a science. In all soundly governed nations, the future is a conversation between the present and the past, in which each judges the other. This judgment will often be severe. Such severity is usually symmetrical, and for so tough a chap naturally fears and loathes its own past. Or the book that he's writing is that because not ready at all to learn from its own past and to accept that many things were better in the past, it naturally loathes and thus wants to erase our own past. But I'm gonna take this. Actually makes a good point for what Mises is trying to tell us here. And since he's saying that, you know, the future should be a conversation between the present and the past, the problem with a bunch of these traditionalist regular reactionaries who just say that everything that was created in our time is trash, is that they are not ready to criticize the past. They're not ready to accept the possibility that things that were created today are better than things that were created in the past, just because they considered society to be generally better in the past. So they're not ready to accept criticism, consider anything that was created, and just expect every grocery store to be a medieval cathedral in terms of architecture.
Yeah, it's just not realistic. And it would be a misallocation of resources to do that. Actually, it's also kind of interesting. Talking about architecture, because I just get reminded about the Catholics, because they have their own rule about how churches should look. And there was this one Orthodox priest that asked a Catholic bishop, and he asked, how many churches in North America follow this guideline to a T? And the bishop said one. The one that I serve at. And it was just kind of interesting, because even the quote-unquote traditionalists, which are the Catholics in the West, they have basically also forgone their own traditions, at least in terms of architecture. That's certainly the case. I would argue a bunch of other things, but yeah, just keep it to architecture. Yeah, no, they don't follow them, so...
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny, because the next paragraph or so states, as the reasons are various, as far as religious buildings are concerned, the accentuated conservatism of the churches shuns any innovation. With the passing of dynasties and aristocracies, the impulse to construct new palaces disappeared. The wealth of entrepreneurs and capitalist demagogues may fable, so much inferior to that of kings and princes that they cannot indulge in such luxurious construction. No one is today rich enough to plan such palaces as that of Versailles or the Escorial. The orders for the construction of government buildings do no longer emanate from despots who are free, in defiance of public opinion, to choose a master whom they themselves held in esteem and to sponsor a project that scandalized the dull majority. Committees and councils are not likely to adopt the ideas of bold pioneers. They prefer to range themselves on the safe side.
Yep. That's a pretty obvious, clear-cut point. It's just, now that the buildings are not being funded by taxes and stuff, they're mostly being funded by private entrepreneurs. They don't have as much, room for just misallocating capital. Which, if you stop and think about it, about a lot of these palaces and stuff that are regarded as wonders of architecture, they're just very big misallocations of capital. Like, they're just very, very large flexes.
Right.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and it's also kind of interesting that especially religious, well, I shouldn't say Catholics, but like any Orthodox person that would say this is because the reintroduction of capitalism in Russia has led to so many churches being built. In the past couple years, 1,000 churches have been built in Moscow.
That's great.
And it's, these aren't going to be, just like the military cathedral that they just built in Russia, but each one is going to have its own beauty, because that's what the Orthodox always have. They don't necessarily have a codified set of rules that all churches must abide by. They just have it must be beautiful and it must conform to these general principles. So yeah, it's these might not be the most beautiful churches in the world, but there will be beauty in them, and because people value that in their churches, but the people actually have a place to go to church. now.
Yep.
Yep. So
Moving to Russia when?
Yeah,
sadly,
sadly, the Soviets have left them with like only 60% of the people actually being Orthodox now, or something like that.
60 or 16.
60 with a 0.
Okay.
They're not the super Orthodox country they were before the Bolshevik Revolution. Before the Bolshevik Revolution, they were basically the new Byzantium Empire that was seen to be symbolic of the monarchy of the of heaven. So the giant Russian Empire was seen to be kind of like heavenly, essentially.
Colton, did you see that show that Eggers, Robert Eggers, the guy who did The Witch and The Lighthouse? That, what is it called? Yeah, it's just The Lighthouse, right? With those two horror movies. He's making that show about Rasputin. I don't know.
I've actually heard about the movie Rasputin, but I haven't seen it.
It's a show that's coming out. I think he's doing it for like HBO. It's a series. It's just about like his life because there's so many like mysterious details. I'm sure it won't make you happy, but I'm sure it would be interesting because it's about an early Orthodox figure. You know what I mean?
That's actually interesting because something that especially with Orthodox people, but Western shows typically downplay the role of their religion in their lives. True. Do you remember the what is it? The Dove Society in Nazi Germany that put out pamphlets against the Nazis during the Third Reich?
No idea.
Okay. The White Rose Society, sorry. So the guy who founded that was actually an Orthodox Christian that had a German father and a Russian mother.
Oh, okay.
We'll see a talk about his religion at all, but during the 30s, he went to Russia to live amongst Orthodox people for a little while. He was a doctor in Germany, and so when the Germans started fighting the Russians, he had a lot of sympathy for the Russian people that were being killed by Germans in the war. Rose Society, which is basically formed almost exclusively, and say that their religion made them do that.
I mean, they
Because
hate religion, so they're only gonna do it when it makes religion look bad.
Yeah, literally.
Was that I'm trying to remember what the guy you recommended this Rasputin. But is The Lighthouse the move, that black and white movie with
Yes.
What's his name?
Willem
He smashes the seagull around.
Yeah, Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. It's like a kind of a low budget horror movie.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually fantastic. I mean, it's just shot wonderfully. It's just like the Witch. It was just like a wonderfully shot movie. It's actually like an art horror film. But it's great. He's a fantastic director.
Mm-hmm. See what how I found out about this movie. I was just curious if that was the same movie, but I found out about this movie because somebody like made this video about it was like the Adventures of Flapjack on Cartoon Network, or what used to be.
Amazing show. Hilarious.
Dude, okay, I know. It was one of the like in the vein of the alternate history hub channels or something like that. That he was just like, so they made a movie about Flapjack, and then he basically just put a review of The Lighthouse and sold it on everybody, and then after that it just started blowing up. Obviously, I haven't watched it yet.
That's so funny.
I know, like the whole time I was like, as he was, I'm starting to think to do that too.
I'm a big horror buff, but yeah,
I'm not really, to be honest, but
yeah,
I'll watch stuff. But anyway, let's move on because I've got like three there's 3 more paragraphs left of this chapter, and then we can be done.
Before I move on, I just want to remind you all that the Soviet Union killed more white Christians than any other government in history. So
Take that, assballs.
If you guys are
You
still
stupid
shilling for
assholes.
Marxists, if you guys are still shilling for the Soviets, you need to stop.
The Soviet Union was more pro-white than any country in the world. And if I see any more of that bullshit, I swear to God.
Yeah, let's go on before we get into that.
Oh, sorry,
Okay.
I misspoke. The White Rose was actually there was only one person in it that was Orthodox. The other 2 people that really founded it were Lutherans.
Oh, okay.
Ah. All right, Emo, let's go.
Alright. There has never been an era in which the many were prepared to do justice to contemporary art. Reverence to the great authors and artists has always been limited to small groups. What characterizes capitalism is not the bad taste of the crowds, but the fact that these crowds, made prosperous by capitalism, became consumers of literature. Of course, of trashy literature. The book market is flooded by a downpour of trivial fiction for the semi-barbarians, but this does not prevent great authors from creating imperishable works. I found that funny that he's just like, yeah, this is true. Like, there's a lot more garbage literature coming out, but at the same time, while there is more garbage coming out, there is more great works coming out. You just gotta search through it, honestly. But nonetheless, he at least admits that. The critics shed tears on the alleged decay of the industrial arts. They contrast example of old furniture as preserved in the castles of European aristocratic families and in the collections of the museums, with the cheap things turned out by big-scale production. They fail to see that these collectors' items were made exclusively for the well-to-do. They carved chests, and in the intarsia, am I saying that word right? Intarsia tables could not be found in the miserable huts of the poorer strata. Those cavilling about the inexpensive furniture of the American wage earner should cross the Rio Grande del Norte and inspect the abodes of the Mexican peons, which are devoid of any furniture. When modern industry began to provide the masses with the paraphernalia of a better life, their main concern was to produce as cheaply as possible without any regard to aesthetic values. Later, when the progress of capitalism had raised the masses' standard of living, they turned step by step to of things which do not lack refinement and beauty. Only romantic prepossession can induce an observer to ignore the fact that more and more citizens of capitalistic countries live in an environment which cannot be simply dismissed as ugly. So, in part, what he's saying is that, yeah, these furnitures and works of art and such that decorated the homes of, aristocrats and stuff, when capitalism came into, I guess, I can't say came into being, but became widely accepted, that people weren't so much concerned with the beauty and such and copying that, but creating these goods as cheaply as possible, rather than, wasting all this labor, making them so much more beautiful than they needed to be for somebody just to sit down.
Yeah.
Why? Like, there's no logical reason to start like building gold-crested thrones for the common person who works in an auto factory. Make them a chair. Make them a chair so they can sit. And as time goes, and people are buying chairs, and carpenters or whoever are gaining the profits, they will put that into decreasing the amount of they will put that into, investing in production so that it is cheaper, so they can create more, artistic and beautiful, chairs than were previously being created.
Yep. Actually, our chairs now have cushions on them where they used to not.
Thank you, God.
So, it's so much nicer. Even though I think that the cushions actually look worse, they are so much better to sit in.
The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been fantastic for the Orthodox faith and their asses.
It's actually kind of funny because the Greeks so
On Twitter.
Yep.
Did we lose Kyle?
No, I'm still here. I'm just listening.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
It seems like everyone has left the live stream. The people watching it, at least. So.
Yeah, we've been here for almost 4 hours, so yeah.
I mean, honestly, this was probably my favorite one we've done yet. With all the tangents and the mess-ups at the beginning. This one was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It probably not what they wanted, because the last time I did a poll, they said they wanted the tangents to be less long.
Yeah, we had a whole hour of a tangent at the beginning, which was funny.
Like I said, that is 100% my fault. We can blame me for that one, just because I tend to do that quite often.
Yeah. No problem. It's just apparently not what the viewers really want from this, essentially.
Yeah.
Oh, now it says there's 3 people again. I'm not sure.
Oh, there's 4 people watching on mine. Okay, maybe they just came back, but yeah. It's the whole non-economic arguments against capitalism don't really make sense, because capitalism just shows what people subjectively value, and it's through people who have certain values to demonstrate why people should have them.
I also think a lot of the arguments against capitalism are they're seeing what they think is capitalism, and honestly, a lot of criticisms and
so weakened in the last 200 years is because they've adopted mass American culture, at least in America, because they adopted mass American culture, and then the Catholics were set to overtake the Protestants, where they had 60 million children in their parochial schools in the 60s. Like 60 active students. 60 million active students. And so they were poised to take over. But then they accepted into their church mass American culture. And they, like the Protestants, have basically weakened their position. And since capitalism, the free marketplace of a religion, basically, that's in America, is all about subjective valuation, it really shows that people do not come to religions just so that they can hear everything a Democratic or Republican congressperson can tell them. They go to religion precisely because it isn't that, essentially. It's not just politics, but with God. And so that's a really important thing if you're ever trying to promote religion. And you basically have to be non-political. At least non-obviously political. Like, you can have sermons that obviously have political meaning, but you can't accept mass American culture. You have to base everything on your own religion and not off of the culture that's surrounding you. So, anyways, I think that's a really interesting insight that, you know, this whole subjective valuation idea kind of gives you.
Yep, I agree. I have nothing to add.
Anybody got anything else to say? Because we're pretty much done with all the chapters and sections for this week.
That's it for me, man. Everyone follow anybody who's gonna watch this. Follow the Hoppean on Twitter. Follow everybody in this chat. The links are in the video. Follow me at either my Anon or my regular account. Figure it out if you. It's pretty easy to figure out my regular account. Just don't dox me, please. Yeah. Thanks to everybody that watched.
Yeah, all the handles are on the top right corner. I put yours there as well, Jens, in the beginning of the episode, so yours is also there. Colton, do you have anything to tell us about the website? Yeah, I'm also pissing off a lot of people on Twitter. Just recently, there's been a lot of drama surrounding my ex, really related to politics, but it was pretty funny nonetheless. For those who didn't catch it earlier, I'm gonna be on the Fakertarians podcast sometime next month or in September. Depends on when they want to have me on. Fakertarians is, an account, a group of people dedicated to calling out, quote-unquote, what they consider fake libertarians, which are just people who are not lawbirds like they are. But, yeah. They called me and a bunch of other people from Hoppean.org out on Facebook a while ago, and I'm gonna go on their podcast to talk about our viewpoints. My viewpoints. I'm kind of unofficially representing Hoppean, since, you know, we're all friends and we're all standing up for against lawbirds and stuff. So I'll definitely tweet out when I get confirmation on when that's gonna happen. But yeah, it's probably going to happen. It's gonna be interesting.
Alright.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think we kept it to under 4 hours, so let's have a round of applause for not doubling our normal runtime.
Yeah. Just barely. We just barely made it. So yeah.
Yeah. So.
Alright, I guess we'll see each other again on Sunday.
I think it is. Emo, when are you available?
I'm going to be moving Sunday and probably Wednesday. I'm gonna try to get everything done in one day though. So hopefully it can be next Wednesday. So
Okay.
let's just put it down for next Wednesday. I'll let y'all know if anything comes up.
Next Wednesday it is then.
Yep. We'll see about
Yeah.
that. If anything changes, we'll let you know. Just follow us on Twitter.
Yep.
Gibbs me dopamine.
Alright.
Alright, later everybody.
Good night.
Shit.